Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Jacque Waller. June 1, 2011 marked a turning point in the life of the Jacque Waller family. That day, Jacque called her sister Cheryl to say that she was going to pick up her children from her ex-husband Clay Waller and would be home later. However, Jacque never returned and did not call back. After trying to contact her sister without success, Cheryl became increasingly worried. To address her concerns, she drove to the police station around 7 p.m. At the station, Cheryl announced that Clay Waller had killed younger sister. It was a shocking statement for all the police, as Jacque had only called Cheryl a few hours earlier and there was no reason to be alarmed and assumed that she was in trouble. But it turned out that Cheryl's hunch was correct, and her sister Jacque was indeed caught up in a macabre story. So what happened to Jacque, and what made Cheryl really believe that Clay Waller had killed her sister even before Jacque was reported missing? Jacque was a sweet, kind, and caring girl when she met Clay, and they hit it off. Clay had a stutter that caused some people to make fun of him, which made him feel self-conscious. Jacque, however, was different. She never made fun of him and always protected him, making sure he didn't get hurt. That was her nature. She protected the vulnerable, fought against injustice, and helped people. As their love blossomed, Jacque and Clay became closer and eventually married when they were in their 30s. They bought a small house in Sanguine View, Missouri, and Jacque was building a family there. Jacque had a successful career, unlike her husband, whose life was constantly failing and couldn't stay in one place for long. As a result, Jacque was the sole provider for the family. She had always dreamed of having children, and when she found out she was pregnant, she was overjoyed. She was even more delighted to learn that she would be having triplets. The couple welcomed 2 daughters, Avery and Addison, and a son named Maddox. Caring for 3 newborns at once was a huge challenge for Jacque, but she did not complain. Instead, she took on the responsibility alone, as her husband seemed indifferent to the children. Clay took a job at the sheriff's office to support the family while his wife took care of the children, but he did not stay long. He was fired after a year, and during that time, only Jacque's parents and sister helped her with the children so she could rest. After Clay lost her job, Jacque began working to support the family. Despite having a child, Clay did not change his habits and showed little interest in his family or his job. Occasionally, he took on a part-time job, but it did not bring in the income they needed. He seemed content to live off Jacque, who worked 40 hours a week while still caring for the children. Jacque's career took off, leading her to a management position at an insurance company. However, this success only made her husband more comfortable, and he decided not to worry about money anymore. Instead of appreciating his wife, Clay abused her in every way possible. He insulted her, called her worthless, and told her that no one wanted her. He had affairs with other women. Jacque's parents and sister were extremely outraged by her husband's behavior and convinced her to divorce him. However, at that time, Jacque was not ready for such an extreme choice and tried to keep her family together. Every day, any hope of saving her marriage went up in smoke before her eyes. A few years later, the couple began to have problems. They were in financial trouble because her husband was not working and Jacque's salary was not enough to support their growing family. The mortgage debts kept mounting and they were in danger of losing their home. Jacque decided to move in with her sister, while her husband stayed with a friend. By this time, the children were a little older and Jacque made the difficult but necessary decision for herself to get a divorce because she felt that she and the children deserved a better life. She talked to her husband about it and at first, Clay took the news calmly. However, he later changed his mind and refused to divorce. Clay began to threaten Jacque. At first, the threats were indirect and vague, but eventually, he directly threatened her life, claiming that divorcing him would be a death sentence for her and the children. This scared Jacque, but she did not give up on her decision. She could not continue living this way and sought to distance herself from her husband. Jacque confided in her family about Clay's behavior and kept a diary of his disturbing actions. She also noted that her husband had been following her. At the time, Jacque and the children were staying with her sister. The children, who were only 5 years old, did not understand the situation, but Jacque explained that it was necessary. Eventually, things began to return to normal and the divorce proceedings were almost complete. Clay seemed to have accepted the divorce and stopped bothering Jacque. The two began to move forward and began to build a new relationship. Jacque allowed her husband to visit the children and they stopped arguing. On June 1, 2011, Clay and Jacque scheduled a meeting at the lawyer's office to discuss the final important details of the divorce. That day, their son Maddox was with his father, while the other children were at Jacque's sister Cheryl's house. After the meeting, Jacque planned to pick up her son. When she left the office, she called her sister Cheryl and told her everything had gone well. She drove to Clay's house to pick up her son and then made plans to return to her sister's house. That was their last conversation. Jacque, 39, never heard from her again. Over time, Cheryl grew worried and started calling Jacque, but she didn't answer. Cheryl then tried calling Clay, but he didn't answer either. Cheryl suspected that Clay might have done something to Jacque, so she texted him, "If I don't hear from Jacque in 5 minutes, I'm calling the police." Clay immediately called her back, asking what was wrong. Cheryl replied that he knew exactly what she meant. But Clay insisted that he did not know where Jacque was and promised to tell her to call Cheryl back when he saw her. Doubting him, Cheryl took younger sister children to her parents' house and filed a police report herself. The police were wary of Cheryl's claim that Clay was involved in her sister's disappearance, but did not send her home to wait for 24 hours to pass. Instead, they quickly decided to contact Clay to find out if there was any clue as to Jacque's whereabouts. They called Clay, and he said that he had lunch with Jacque. He said that they had met at the lawyer's office to discuss some aspects of the divorce and then drove to his house to talk further. He said they had a chat and then he went to the store. When he returned, Jacque's car was gone and he assumed that she had left. According to Clay, their son Maddox was in Illinois with his new girlfriend at the time, and Jacque knew this and was not concerned about their son. He insisted that she had come to his house just to talk, not for their son. Clay's words seemed hard to believe. Jacque had made it clear to her sister that she had come to Clay's house for her son. She had no intention of discussing anything with him, especially since she would not allow her son to be with another woman so far away. She would have been furious with Clay in that situation. Cheryl did not believe the story. She convinced the police that Clay was lying and hiding something, and that things were indeed serious. Jacque and her car were reported missing, and a massive search began. Hours later, Jacque's car, a Honda Pilot, was found on the interstate with flat tires. It was no accident. The tires had been deliberately punctured and looked like they had been set up. The car was found open and empty, with some blood on the back seat, but there were no clues to Jacque's whereabouts. It seemed increasingly likely that she had been attacked and kidnapped. The search for Jacque focused on that area, with many volunteers working alongside police and rescue dogs. Despite the unbearable heat, people were eager to help. The family offered a $3,500 reward for any information about Jacque's whereabouts. Despite their efforts, the search was unsuccessful. The police began to focus more on her ex-husband, Clay. They went to his house to talk to him again, but Clay repeated the same story. When police asked to search his home and car, Clay refused and immediately hired a lawyer to defend his rights. For days after she disappeared, Clay left his wife a tearful voicemail, "Hi honey, it's Sunday. I went missing on Wednesday. Please, if you get this message, call me. I don't know where you are and I miss you so much. Please call me." The police then obtained a search warrant and returned to his home. While examining the car, they discovered stains that looked like blood. The forensic team collected samples and sent them for testing, which showed that they were fish blood. It turned out that Clay had intentionally covered the car with fish blood to throw the forensic experts off. When the house was inspected, it was noticed that the floor had no carpet. A section of the floor had been cut out, leaving a noticeable mark. Small drops of blood were found on the basement hallway wall. There were signs that furniture had been moved. Something unusual was going on in the house. The forensic team checked under the floor and discovered a bloody carpet. Blood and carpet samples were sent to the lab for analysis. The police tracked Jacque's last movements. At 1:10 a.m., she was seen at a pharmacy with her ex-husband. They appeared to be normal. 2 hours later, Jacque was caught on camera. ATM security recorded the withdrawal. Jacque did not appear on the surveillance camera afterward, while Clay did. Hours later, Clay, his son, and his new girlfriend went to a toy store. They then went to a car wash in his pickup truck, which had a suspicious trash can inside. Clay changed clothes and washed the car and boat. Suspicion grew around Clay, and he became the prime suspect. Police released photos of Clay's pickup truck and boat, asking any witnesses who saw them to come forward. A young couple reported seeing Clay near Devil's Island on the Mississippi River, which was later confirmed by Clay's cell phone records. This prompted police to conduct a search of the area, but despite their efforts, nothing was found. At that time, forensic testing revealed that drops of blood found in Clay's home matched those of the missing woman, Jacque. Based on this evidence, the police suspected that Jacque was likely dead. The police brought Clay in for questioning and attempted to get him to confess to the murder. However, he refused to admit to any wrongdoing, instead claiming that it was old blood from a domestic violence incident in the kitchen. Without a body, the police could not arrest a suspect and charge him. They released Clay but continued to monitor and investigate him. Clay, who had worked as a deputy sheriff, knew full well that the police were watching him, and he played a cat-and-mouse game with them. He would go to deserted vacant lots to disrupt the investigation while the entire neighborhood was involved in the search for Jacque, the missing mother of 3 children. Clay continued to harass the search party and Jacque's family. He drove by, insulting them and yelling that they were wasting their time, claiming that they wouldn't find anything. His defiant behavior raised more and more suspicions. Meanwhile, Jacque's sister, Cheryl, sought custody of the triplets, fearing for their safety as Clay was their father. Clay's erratic behavior eventually led to Cheryl gaining custody, which angered him even more. He began threatening Cheryl with violence, even posting about it on social media. Cheryl recorded these threats and reported them to the police. Nearly 5 months after Jacque's disappearance, police arrested Clay and charged him with making threats to death. Although he admitted to the charges, Clay claimed he acted out of anger and despair over losing custody of the children, with no intention of harming Cheryl. He believes he is the victim in this situation. During the investigation, police discover that Clay is being accused of stealing $50,000 from a previous company and stalking a man. Despite this, Clay denies any involvement in Jacque's disappearance. When questioned, Clay claims that Jacque's new lover, Harry, is responsible for her death. However, police investigate Harry and discover that he has a solid alibi, eliminating him as a suspect. The evidence points to Clay, but he continues to deny any wrongdoing. He is eventually sentenced to 5 years in prison for threatening his wife's sister, Cheryl. Police continue to investigate Jacque's disappearance, searching Devil's Island but finding no trace of her. 2 years after her disappearance, police had gathered enough circumstantial evidence, including video footage and blood found in Clay's home, to charge him with Jacque's murder, even though her body had never been found. It was a risky move, because if they lost, the DA's office would not be able to charge him a second time. However, the prosecutor was determined. Clay, after consulting with his attorney, made a deal with the prosecutor to reduce his sentence. Clay offered to plead guilty to murder and provide a burial site. Jacque's family agreed to the deal because it was important to find her body and give her a proper burial. Clay led police to his ex-wife's burial site. It was located in a remote location on a sandbar on the Illinois side of the Mississippi River. The initial investigation was hampered because Clay could not remember the exact tree in which he had buried Jacque's body. However, he eventually revealed that he had placed a bag of fertilizer on top of her grave. A gardener pointed out that large amounts of fertilizer could kill trees, leading the police to focus on 3 dead trees in the area. When they dug up the grave, they found Jacque's body under one of the trees, wearing the same clothes she had last worn. The woman was identified from dental records as Jacque Waller. The discovery of Jacque's body brought closure to her loved ones, who were finally able to hold a funeral for her. Ironically, the ceremony was held on her parents' 50th wedding anniversary. At this time, Cheryl had to tell her children that their mother had died and that their father was responsible for her death. This revelation was devastating to the children, who not only lost their mother, but also their relationship with their father. The children immediately shunned Clay and refused to communicate with him. As part of his plea agreement, Clay was required to provide a detailed confession of his crimes. According to his statement, he began thinking about murder a year before Jacque died, after she announced that she wanted to end their relationship. Despite these dark thoughts, he initially pushed them aside because Jacque was the mother of his children. Clay felt he couldn't let Jacque take his children. He had warned her earlier that if she continued to do so, things would not end well for her, but she chose to ignore him. The night before the murder, he had dug a grave for Jacque on Devil's Island. It was then that he began to consider taking her life. At the time, their divorce seemed to be going smoothly. After visiting a lawyer, the couple had a conversation in which Jacque suggested they have one last intimate encounter together. They went to his house, where they continued the conversation in the kitchen. He opened the refrigerator to find a snack. When he raised his head, he accidentally hit Jacque on the head, causing her nose to bleed. This enraged her, and she stormed out into the hallway. She began screaming that he would never see their children again. This was Clay's breaking point. In a fit of rage, he punched her in the face and then strangled her. After the fight, he dumped Jacque's body in a prepared grave on Devil's Island. He then cleaned up the crime scene by washing his car, cleaning the house, and showering. He changed into new clothes and attempted to resume his normal routine by meeting his new girlfriend and son at a toy store, as if nothing out of the ordinary had happened. Clay claimed the murder was an impulsive act driven by emotion, contradicting his earlier statement about digging the grave the day before. This inconsistency raised suspicions of premeditated murder. The medical examiner's report showed that the victim had suffered multiple skull fractures, consistent with blunt force trauma rather than a simple fight. Clay's initial story was not believed. Clay seemed content with his 20-year sentence for second-degree murder, showing no remorse for killing his ex-wife Jacque. However, the prosecution had a surprising twist. The hole he dug to bury Jacque was in another state, Illinois, and the murder took place in Missouri. These features fall under federal laws against domestic violence across states, and he violated them. This allowed him to add 35 years to his sentence. Clay Waller would be eligible for parole after serving 85% of his 55-year sentence. Clay had no idea that his confession would have serious consequences due to a federal law he was unaware of. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Sierra Breeland. Sierra Locklear, a cheerful and ambitious woman from Cleveland, Georgia, grew up with a dream to live in Atlanta one day. To achieve her goal, she had to leave her home state and pursue higher education. She attended the University of Tennessee for her undergraduate degree and then earned her law degree from Florida State University. Sierra became a successful lawyer, specializing in insurance defense. According to her mother, Kelly, Sierra was an energetic person who overcame obstacles to achieve her goals. She was happy, loving, and dedicated to her career. In October 2020, Sierra met Xavier Breeland on Tinder, and their relationship quickly blossomed. They got married just 6 months later, and Sierra soon became pregnant. During this time, she provided legal assistance to Xavier in his dispute with his ex-wife. They decided to start a new life in Carmel, Indiana, where Sierra secured a job at a law firm. At the end of 2021, she gave birth to a son, whom they named Jackson. Xavier and Sierra appeared to be a perfect couple from the outside, but their relationship was troubled from the start. According to Shelby Campbell, Sierra's best friend, problems began to surface shortly after they started dating. Sierra had initially tried to end things with Xavier, but he refused to accept rejection. He showed up uninvited at her apartment and sent threatening messages when he saw her with another man. Sierra gave Xavier another chance, and they married 6 months later. However, Sierra confided in Shelby about her growing fears and concerns about her husband's behavior. In one text message, Sierra expressed her feelings of being torn between her love for Xavier and her fear of his increasingly bad behavior. She worried about their future together, citing his lack of remorse for his actions and his tendency to blame her for his behavior. Their text exchanges, which Shelby shared, demonstrate the depth of Sierra's fear. On multiple occasions, Sierra called the police out of desperation, but by the time they arrived, Sierra would downplay the situation, fearing the consequences of speaking out against her husband. This cycle repeated itself in both Georgia and Indiana, where the police were called to their residence multiple times. Sierra's parents, Kelly and Nick Lair, were aware that her home life with Xavier was troubled. They encouraged her to end the relationship, reassuring her that she could always return to the safety of her family home. Sierra's journey to Georgia began when she and Xavier embarked on the 11-hour drive south. Sierra arrived at her parents' house on February 19th, where she spent the night with relatives she hadn't seen since moving to Indiana. Sierra planned the trip to visit her family in Georgia, secretly intending to stay and divorce her husband Xavier due to escalating abuse. She told her parents about her plans and the abuse, and they supported her decision. On February 19th, Sierra arrived at her parents' house in Cleveland, Georgia, and reaffirmed her decision to divorce Xavier. The next day, she left to pick up her son Jackson from her mother-in-law's house in Johns Creek, Georgia. Sierra sent a text message to her best friend saying that she was waiting to pick up Jackson, but Xavier was refusing to hand him over to her. On February 21st, Sierra texted Nick, her father, saying she'd return home the next morning, and he gave her permission. When her father didn't hear back the next day, he reached out, and Sierra replied that everything was fine, just that she was feeling under the weather. Nick texted Sierra on Wednesday and Thursday, but she didn't respond. By Friday, her family was worried. On Saturday, Nick received a call from an Indiana police officer who said Sierra was missing and her husband had filed a report. The family was shocked, wondering why Sierra hadn't told them she was in Indiana. Nick called Xavier's father. He denied seeing Sierra, but it was later revealed that Xavier had reported her missing to the Carmel Police Department on February 26, 2022. Video footage showed her last known location was her mother-in-law's home in Georgia on February 24th. Sierra disappeared on February 25th after leaving her Carmel home to walk to a store around 1 p.m. She was last seen wearing a black top and purple shorts, despite the low temperature. However, she never arrived at the store and left behind her personal belongings, including 3 phones and her 5-month-old son. The family finds it suspicious as Sierra had a burner phone for emergencies and wouldn't leave her baby behind. Kelly, Sierra's mother, said Sierra confided in her about the couple's financial struggles and alleged her son-in-law was physically and emotionally abusive. When Sierra went missing, leaving her baby behind, Kelly feared the worst. Kelly described Sierra as a loving mom who prioritized her son's care. When Sierra vanished without the baby, her husband's alibi seemed suspicious. 2 days later, police visited Xavier, Sierra's husband, after an accidental gunshot at his home. His criminal past, including a 2005 felony conviction, raised suspicions. Xavier was named a person of interest in his wife Sierra's disappearance and arrested on an unrelated charge. He had an outstanding warrant for aggravated stalking in Qua County, where he had tracked his ex-wife using a GPS device in their children's stuffed animal. 2 weeks after Sierra's disappearance, police, volunteers, family, and friends searched neighborhoods in Johns Creek, focusing on areas along Medlock Bridge Road. They passed out flyers and set up electronic signs asking for the public's help, and contacted companies to display Sierra's information across Metro Atlanta. The family of Sierra sought information on her disappearance, specifically regarding a white 2017 Volkswagen Tiguan. During the investigation, Xavier, Sierra's husband, was the only person seen getting out of the car at gas stations and shops. Law enforcement officials searched the mother-in-law's house, collecting evidence with a search warrant, and forensic professionals and cadavered dogs to look for signs of a struggle or potential blood stains. A search of Xavier Breeland's residence by authorities, including a K-9 unit, found no trail. A video from March 2022 shows Xavier telling his children that Sierra was kidnapped and won't be coming home, contradicting his previous statement to police. The video was obtained while Xavier was in jail for aggravated stalking, unrelated to Sierra's disappearance. In August 2022, Xavier was found not guilty, but he was quickly arrested again and extradited to Indiana to face a new charge, unlawful possession of a firearm by a serious violent felon. At his initial hearing, Xavier asked the judge to reduce his bail to an amount his mother could afford. The judge set the bail at $35,000, lower than the $50,000 requested by prosecutors. Xavier promised the judge that he would turn his life around if released, even offering to get a job as a truck driver. Despite Xavier's plea, the judge ultimately set the bail at $100,000. Xavier was eventually released in February 2023 after posting bail. However, this decision would have consequences that will be discussed later. Xavier was repeatedly questioned about Sierra Breeland's disappearance, but he maintained his innocence, claiming she vanished after going to the store. He stuck to this story, denying any involvement in her disappearance. The search for evidence in Sierra Breeland's disappearance is a daunting task, considering the vast areas of land that need to be searched. Court documents revealed that some items were taken from Xavier's mom's home. Crime scene investigators removed the carpet and mattress from the home on April 21, 2022. After Xavier's arrest on March 1, 5-month-old Jackson was taken into state care. Sierra's parents, Nick and Kelly, are now able to be with their newborn grandchildren and are working to bring the infant back home to Georgia. Despite Sierra remains missing. Over the past year, multiple searches have been conducted, focusing on specific areas, but sadly, no leads have been found. Xavier Breeland is the only person of interest named in Sierra's disappearance, but no charges have been brought against him. Her family believes he knows what happened to her and is the only one who can give them answers. Kelly Leclerc thinks Sierra's body could be in Georgia, Tennessee, Kentucky, or Indiana and is asking outdoor enthusiasts to be on the lookout. Sierra's parents now have custody of the couple's child. Xavier was released on bail for an unrelated firearms case, but failed to appear in court and a warrant has been issued for his arrest. The FBI is now involved in the case, and the search for Sierra and Xavier continues. The disappearance of both Sierra and Xavier has raised many unanswered questions. Sierra's mother believes Sierra feared Xavier and didn't plan to return to Indiana with him. With both missing, the case is now more urgent. The trial for Xavier's gun charge has been postponed, and authorities and Sierra's family are seeking public help to locate them and shed light on their disappearances. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Mackenzie Lueck. Mackenzie Lueck was born on March 8, 1996, to Diana and Gregory Lueck. Her father worked in healthcare logistics and administration, and her mother was a homemaker. Mackenzie grew up in El Segundo, a city in Los Angeles County, California, with an older brother and two younger brothers. Mackenzie attended El Segundo High School, where she was a member of the swim team and played water polo. Mackenzie was a hardworking student with a strong interest in art, music, and animals. Mackenzie attended the University of Utah, where she majored in kinesiology and nursing and was a member of the Alpha Kappa Omega sorority. While in college, Mackenzie shared her feminist views and switched her political orientation from major party to conservative third party. Mackenzie worked at a biotesting company in Salt Lake City. Mackenzie wanted to pursue a career in health sciences, discussed with her counselors plans to attend nursing or medical school, and expected to graduate in May 2020. The Mackenzie family lived a normal life until everything changed on June 17, 2019. On that day, Mackenzie returned to Salt Lake City, Utah, after her grandmother's funeral. She arrived at Salt Lake City International Airport around 2 a.m. and texted her mother, "Just landed and love you, Mom." When her mother Diana answered a few moments later, Diana discovered that Mackenzie's phone was turned off. Her father Gregory also tried to call Mackenzie but was routed to her voicemail, causing Mackenzie's family to become very concerned for her safety. On June 20th, Mackenzie's parents realized that her friends had not seen or heard from her either. Mackenzie's friends reported her missing to the Salt Lake City Police Department. Over the next 2 weeks, while Mackenzie's parents Diana, Gregory, and their 3 sons tried everything they could to find Mackenzie in California, Mackenzie's Alpha Kappa Omega sorority sisters organized search efforts in Utah. They even created a Facebook page called Find Mackenzie Lueck to attract national media attention to the case. As police searched for clues about Mackenzie, they discovered video footage of Mackenzie at the airport. She was then picked up by a Lyft driver and taken to Hatch Park in North Salt Lake, about 13 miles away. Police checked Mackenzie's cell phone records, confirming that Mackenzie had been at the park. Police also discovered that Mackenzie had exchanged several text messages with a person named AAE, whom she had allegedly met on a dating website and planned to meet in person. Mackenzie's last text message to AAE was sent at 2:58 a.m. Cell phone records showed that both Mackenzie and AAE were at Hatch Park at the same time. Notably, at 2:59 a.m., Mackenzie's phone stopped transmitting data or location information, indicating that the phone had been turned off. Police tracked AAE's cell phone signal, which led them from the park to his home at 547 North 1000 West in a Fair Park neighborhood. Police found that AAE's cell phone was at his home at 3:07 a.m., just 7 to 8 minutes after he picked up Mackenzie from the park. Since AAE was the prime suspect in Mackenzie's disappearance, police decided to execute a search warrant at his home. During the search, police discovered a newly dug area in the backyard. Inside this area, they found burned human bones, muscle tissue, and charred personal items. In a nearby alley, police also discovered charred fabric and other items belonging to the victim. After the DNA from the bones matched the DNA profile of the items found, police identified the victim as Mackenzie. A neighbor reported a foul odor coming from a campfire in AAE's backyard, which was also fueled by gasoline, on June 17 and again on June 18. This is where police found a shallow grave containing bones and tissue. Police impounded AAE's car after detecting a strong smell of gasoline and finding a red gas can in the trunk. They discovered that a can of gasoline had been purchased at a local store at 9 a.m. the day Mackenzie went missing. After arresting AAE, police checked his cell phone records, which showed AAE's phone was in Logan Canyon, a location where he buried Mackenzie's body on June 25. Between 2:30 p.m. and 4:30 p.m. police searched the area and found freshly disturbed soil in a wooded area near the main road, where they discovered a charred human body. On July 3, the medical examiner confirmed that the body was that of Mackenzie. Her hands had been bound behind her back with zip ties and rope. The cause of death was determined to be blunt force trauma to the left side of the skull, and her death was classified as a homicide. On October 7, 2020, AAE pleaded guilty to first-degree aggravated murder and third-degree indignity to a human body in connection with Mackenzie's death. AAE was sentenced to life in prison without parole, plus 5 years for indecent assault on Mackenzie. AAE was also charged with kidnapping another woman in March 2018, whom AAE met on a dating website. In addition, AAE was charged with 19 counts of sexual exploitation of a minor. These charges arose in August 2019 when police discovered child pornography on AAE's computer while investigating Mackenzie's death on July 2. The images reportedly showed children aged between 4 and 8. On October 1, 2020, AAE pleaded not guilty to these charges and the pornography charges were eventually dismissed. The tragic death of Mackenzie Lueck has had a profound impact on her family, friends, and the entire nation. Her cheerful personality, zest for life, and desire to make a positive impact were suddenly ended by a senseless act of violence. Mackenzie's story serves as an important reminder to always be cautious and safe, especially when using online dating services. Rest in peace, Mackenzie Lueck. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Buchanan family. Molly first met Adam Buchanan when she applied for a job as an office manager at his company. At the time, Adam was divorced and raising his son, Nolan, from a previous marriage on his own. The cheerful and outgoing Molly quickly caught Adam's attention. Their mutual interests led to a romance that blossomed into a serious relationship, and eventually, Molly moved in with Adam. Molly became pregnant and their baby was named Gavin. Those who knew the Buchanans described them as a loving family of 4. The patriarch of the family owned a construction company, and they purchased a vacation property in El Dorado County, California, a small cabin on 19 acres in Greenwood. The rustic cabin had no electricity, water, sewer, or gas. Adam, who worked in construction, became actively involved in renovating it, and the family began visiting regularly. On September 13, 2015, at 10 a.m., members of the Garden Valley Fire Department were called to a wildfire in Greenwood Township. Located on Highway 193 between Cool and Georgetown. When they arrived, they found that the fire had burned 10 acres of land, and while the cabin was still smoldering, it was completely destroyed. Fire department personnel found charred remains in the ashes. The fire scene was still intact, and at 11 a.m., firefighters contacted the El Dorado County Sheriff's Office. At the time, no one understood the severity of the situation. Firefighters suspected that the victim of the wildfire was a pet trapped inside the house. When they arrived, the rest of the house was still smoldering, making it impossible to check inside. They had to wait for the fire to go out and the temperature to drop. While investigating the house, police officers detected an odor similar to that of burning flesh. Police later found a human skull and a charred torso, indicating that a tragedy had occurred. Police called for backup. Officers from the sheriff's office arrived to thoroughly investigate the scene. It became clear that the small, isolated cabin was not the owner's primary residence, but rather a vacation home. A Dodge pickup truck and trailer were discovered on a plot of land near the cabin. Police obtained the license plate number to identify the owner, who may have been affected by the wildfire. It was quickly determined that the truck and trailer belonged to Buchanan Construction, owned by Adam Buchanan. He lived approximately 160 miles away, in Bonita, California. Police were unsure whether the person inside was Adam Buchanan or someone else. The name of the company owner provided police with their first lead into the investigation. The Bonita police were tasked with checking on the welfare of all members of the Buchanan family. They arrived at the address and parked in the Buchanan driveway, where they saw a white Ford pickup truck. When the officers knocked on the door, Nolan, Adam's 16-year-old son from his first marriage, answered. He was surprised to see the officers in uniform and asked why they were there. In order to avoid alarming anyone in the house, the officers decided to first determine who was inside. Nolan explained that his father, Adam, had gone away for the weekend to their estate, 160 miles away, with Molly and their 8-year-old son, Gavin, and they were expected back that evening. According to Nolan, his father had left him in charge of the house. Police did not yet have enough evidence to confirm that the remains found in the cabin were those of the Buchanans, but the information they gathered, along with the discovery of what they believed to be 2 human remains on the evening of September 13th, was enough to report the family missing from the El Dorado County fire. The following day, September 14th, El Dorado County Police went to the Nolan home to conduct more in-depth interviews and identify the victims of the fire. At the home, officers spoke with Adam's parents, Howard and Susan Buchanan. They mentioned that their son, the owner of the burned-out cabin, had been coming to the cabin to do repairs himself. The parents were very concerned because they had not been able to contact their son or daughter-in-law until that time. From their statements, officers learned that the home was equipped with a generator, but that there was no electricity at the time of the incident. There were also gas tanks inside. This led to 2 possible explanations: the fire could have been accidental or intentional. By September 15th, the fire had cooled, allowing police to collect evidence, including debris from a nearby fire pit. Detective James Peterson of the El Dorado County Sheriff's Office reported finding new remains, which changed the direction of the investigation. Police discovered a skull fragment with a bullet hole. At that point, it was clear that a homicide had occurred, and according to the sheriff, it could no longer be considered an accidental fire. The remains were collected and sent for DNA testing. In the first set of remains, a bullet was found lodged in the victim's thigh. The bullet-riddled skull was identified as that of a child. There was now no doubt that the fire had been used to cover up the crime. Police initially focused on whether anyone in his profession might have had a grudge against him. They also looked into Molly's life to see if she had any enemies who might have committed the crime. When those leads proved fruitless, police began looking into Molly and Adam's marital problems, which uncovered more problems. Police discovered that Molly and Adam's relationship had deteriorated significantly over time and that at the time of the murders, they had been sleeping in separate rooms for some time. A diary belonging to Molly detailed instances of abuse by Adam. Witnesses reported that Adam had not only abused Molly, but also abused children. Molly's mother, Susie Slanker, expressed to police that she feared that the couple might seriously harm each other during their arguments. Although Molly did not end her relationship with Adam, she would occasionally leave with her son to stay at her parents' house, returning after a few days until the next argument. It was also revealed that the couple enjoyed hunting in the area near their vacation home. Since both were armed, the police hypothesized that during an argument, one of them picked up a gun and shot the other, then, realizing the seriousness of the situation, committed suicide. There was a notable contradiction. If the tragedy had been caused by a conflict between husband and wife, there should have been a weapon found near one of them. However, no weapon was found. The police thought that the weapon might have been destroyed in the fire, making identification more difficult. For 5 days, members of the forensic team meticulously sifted through the ashes of the house. Despite a thorough search, they did not find any weapons. At this point, the medical examiner confirmed that the DNA found on the bodies belonged to Adam Buchanan, Molly McAfee, and their 8-year-old son Gavin. All 3 victims had suffered gunshot wounds prior to the fire, and the angle of the shot made it unlikely that they had committed suicide. The absence of a gun suggested that a 4th person had been present in the home who had shot the Buchanans, prompting a complete reopening of the investigation. Police turned to the victim's 16-year-old son, Nolan. He told police that the family had driven away in an old Dodge truck. Nolan explained that his father had chosen to use the company truck instead of their personal Ford, which was parked in the driveway, because he had loaded it with rocks for landscaping near their country cabin. The truck was later found near the burned-out cabin. When asked why Nolan did not go on vacation with his relatives, he explained, as he had in his first interview, that he needed to take care of the house and garden while his father and stepmother were away. Nolan also mentioned that a neighbor was illegally planting trees on the edge of the Buchanan property, which led to frequent arguments between his father and the neighbor. His father would often demand that the neighbor stop planting trees and threaten to call the police. Nolan spoke about the difficulties of the family business, revealing that the company was facing serious financial problems. The company was downsizing, with only 5 employees remaining. According to his father, debts were mounting rapidly. The investigation identified a suspect, a neighbor. The main problem was that no one could identify which neighbors were involved. The police went door to door, interviewing homeowners in the area. This approach paid off when they found a man who confirmed that he had argued with Adam about growing an illegal crop. However, he claimed that the disagreement ended after a tense conversation and that he had an alibi. After confirming the neighbor's alibi, the police investigated the family's financial situation, as their business was struggling. On September 18th, police went to Adam's company to talk to the employees. Nolan's words were correct. The company was in dire straits, facing bankruptcy with debts exceeding $30,000. As a result, several employees were fired. Several of these former employees were very unhappy about being fired, making them potential suspects in the case. This aspect provided an important lead for the police. Over the weekend, the local high school held a community cleanup day. Students worked to clear debris from a park located about a mile from Adam's construction company. During the cleanup on September 19th, they discovered a small wallet containing Molly McAfee and Adam Buchanan's wallets and identification cards, hidden under one of the bushes. There was also a .22 caliber rifle nearby. Police were dispatched to the scene immediately. The county sheriff's office has since developed a new theory. The suspect may have used the rifle to kill the Buchanans and, to conceal the crime, remove their identification from the scene. This finding is significant because it suggests that someone traveled from Bonita to Greenwood to kill the family and then returned to Bonita to dispose of the evidence and the weapon. This suspect is likely a Bonita resident. The location of the evidence near Buchanan Construction supports the idea that the boss was killed by a disgruntled employee. Police have sent the gun and bag of documents for analysis and are seeking a search warrant for the company's records and premises. During their search, police accessed a video surveillance camera located on the company's premises. Fortunately, the camera focused on the parking lot, not the company's premises. Surveillance footage showed the family had left town on Friday, so police reviewed footage from that day. They were surprised to see that Adam had hooked up a trailer full of rocks to a Ford F-150, not a Dodge truck as Nolan had claimed. Police discovered that Nolan had deliberately interfered with the investigation. If the white Ford had pulled the rock trailer to the cabin, then someone must have driven it back and parked it in the Buchanan family's driveway. Police decided to interview Nolan again. Nolan repeated his account of the weekend, where he had been, and who he had met, but this time they also asked him about the movie he had seen at the theater and how he had paid for his shopping at the mall. When asked how he paid for dessert on their date, Nolan said he used his father's credit card. Police then obtained a search warrant for Buchanan's Bonita home, inspected his vehicles and reviewed his financial records. They found a Ford parked in the driveway, which they carefully inspected. They noticed red dirt on the tires, which matched the dirt found in Greenwood. If the Ford had made the trip the previous weekend or earlier, some dirt might have remained. Unfortunately, the fire destroyed the tire tracks near the cabin, but the accumulation of dirt suggested the car may have been in Greenwood recently. Officers tracked the bank card transactions and discovered that Adam Buchanan used his credit card at Taco Bell on Friday, September 11th, while traveling to Greenwood. Nolan, on the other hand, claimed he was home, not with his parents, and had a credit card with him. Police went to the diner and reviewed security footage, confirming their suspicions. A white Ford was seen instead of a truck. When they searched the Ford, they found a Taco Bell receipt from September 11th showing 4 drinks purchased, not 3. Additionally, evidence at the scene of the fire showed the presence of 4 drink cups, confirming that Nolan had been in the car. The next credit card transaction occurred on Saturday, September 12th, at the Valencia Club bar in Buchanan, about 30 minutes from the cabin. Adam's parents had alerted detectives to the bar, saying their son and daughter-in-law often went there after working on renovating the cabin. Security cameras recorded the moment the couple left the bar, and highway traffic cameras tracked their route. A Ford F-150 was seen heading toward the Buchanan cabin at 2:30 a.m. on the day of the fire, and then driving in the opposite direction at 3:30 a.m. In the first instance, cameras captured Adam and Molly in the car. In the second, only Nolan was recorded. Hours later, on the morning of Sunday, September 13th, Adam's credit card was used at 3 locations owned by Bonita, Starbucks, McDonald's, and a gas station. The bank confirmed to police that Buchanan had only 1 bank card. This information contradicted Nolan's accounts. At this time, forensic results showed that Nolan's fingerprints were found on the gun. He was arrested in the classroom. Nolan Buchanan pleaded not guilty to the charges against him and attempted to twist the story by claiming that his father had shot his family. He said his father had pointed a gun at him, and in self-defense he took the weapon away, accidentally shooting his father. Nolan maintained that it was self-defense, claiming that the fire and his subsequent lies were due to his panic and extreme fear. He explained that he had doused the house with gasoline and set it on fire to cover it up. The defense repeatedly pointed to Adam's abusive behavior toward his son and other family members to the jury. The medical examiner raised doubts about the verdict, noting that the gunshot wound to Gavin's skull indicated it was fired at a nearly 90 degrees angle. Nolan, meanwhile, claimed that he and his brother's beds were next to each other and that they were both awakened by noises and screams. At that point, Nolan allegedly saw someone enter the bedroom and shoot Gavin. The shooter then pointed the rifle at Nolan, who was able to push the attacker away. According to this account, the shot would have come from about a 45 degrees angle, which is inconsistent with forensic evidence. The prosecution believes Nolan shot his younger brother Gavin while they were home alone, as their parents were at a bar. After waiting for their father and stepmother to return, Nolan shot them as well. The position of the bodies suggested that Adam was killed first, followed by Molly. Nolan then took his rifle, his parents' papers, poured gasoline over the bodies, and set the house on fire. He then went home, met his girlfriend, and spent the day with her to establish his alibi. On July 13th, 2018, a jury convicted Nolan Buchanan of 3 counts of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to 150 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 25 years. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Chenet Edwards. Chenet was born in 1989 in Warrnambool, Australia, to a loving family that included her parents and older brother Tyson. Those who knew her describe her as a free-spirited adventurer with a deep love for nature. She enjoyed hiking, motorcycling, and was a compassionate animal lover. Chenet had a unique gift for forming profound connections with others, often going out of her way to show kindness and generosity to those she met. Her selfless nature was evident in the many ways she helped others, from sharing leftovers with the homeless in Melbourne to teaching orphan children in Colombia and English to Cambodian children. She also tutored a Japanese student and, more recently, cared for a pregnant stray cat that had made her home on her terrace in Georgia. Chenet had always been drawn to Georgia, captivated by its natural beauty, rich history, and cultural landmarks. In 2019, she decided to visit the country, and her boyfriend, Modi El Sayed, a Lebanese national whom she had met during her travels, was also planning to join her. However, El Sayed's travel plans were thwarted due to enter problem. Chenet, meanwhile, was able to enter the country and was thrilled to discover that Georgia lived up to her high expectations. She was enchanted by the country's warm hospitality, breathtaking natural scenery, ancient temples, and delectable cuisine, and ended up staying for almost 2 years before her next adventure took an unexpected turn. Chenet lived in Tbilisi, the capital city of Georgia, where she worked as an English teacher. This job allowed her to earn a living and have enough free time to explore the country and visit new places. During her adventures, she met like-minded friends who shared her passion for travel. On July 29, 2021, she posted a photo on social media with a one-word caption, "Joy." The photo showed her enjoying a scenic motorcycle ride, a hobby she loved. The next day, July 30, 2021, was sunny, so Chenet decided to hike up Datsminda, a popular destination among tourists and locals. The mountain is home to the Temple of St. David, nestled among the evergreen vegetation on its slope. Chenet was last spotted near the Church of St. Michael of Tavares, which is located at the foot of Mount Datsminda and serves as a starting point for hikers. Chenet was supposed to meet friends at a cafe in the capital city that evening, but she never arrived. When they couldn't reach her by phone, they reported her missing to the police. Around the same time, a friend living in California, who knew Chenet, grew concerned and called Chenet at 4:32 p.m. When Chenet answered, her friend heard her terrified screams, "Please let me go, okay, just let me go." It was clear Chenet was being attacked and pleading to be released. The call abruptly ended, and when Chenet's friend tried calling back, there was no answer. The California friend then reached out to a Facebook group for international individuals living in Georgia, asking someone to contact the police about the alarming call. Chenet's friend reportedly contacted the Georgian police, informing them about the distressing phone call Chenet had made. Regardless of who initiated the contact, it is clear that the Georgian police were quickly alerted and began verifying the information. A massive search operation was launched, involving several hundred police officers and volunteers. The search area was vast, and multiple groups scoured the slopes of Mount Datsminda. The police employed search dogs and drones to aid in the search, but unfortunately, Chenet was not found. As the sun began to set, concerns grew, as Chenet had not returned home, her phone was off, and she had not sought help at any local hospitals. Tragically, the next day, July 31st, the search efforts ended in the discovery of 31-year-old Chenet Edwards' body near a hiking trail. The perpetrator had attempted to conceal the crime by hiding the body under tree branches and leaves. A knife, believed to be the murder weapon, was found nearby. Further investigation at the crime scene revealed an old rusty shovel, a fireplace, used needles, and numerous empty bottles. During the autopsy, it was discovered that Chenet had 13 stab wounds, with 5 of them located in the neck area. This led police to conclude that the perpetrator undoubtedly intended to kill her. Additionally, there were signs of strangulation on her neck. After Chenet's death was confirmed, some media outlets reported that the crime was motivated by lust. However, the Georgian police denied this claim, as the forensic medical examiner found no evidence of a crime against her personal integrity. Modi El Sayed, Chenet's boyfriend, is consumed by a desire for revenge against her killer. He has made it his mission to track down the culprit, no matter the cost or time it takes. "My sole focus is on revenge," he stated. "I'm willing to risk spending the rest of my life in prison if it means justice is served and the perpetrator suffers as much as Chenet did." This case significant impact on Georgia's tourism industry. With over $1 billion in annual revenue at stake, the fact that a tourist was killed in the state capital could have serious repercussions for the industry as a whole. The police conducted a thorough investigation, gathering information from over 200 individuals, including friends, colleagues, neighbors, and employees from Matanzama Park, as well as visitors. Investigators also reviewed security footage and analyzed plant life found near the crime scene. A woman from the area shared on an expat Facebook group that she heard a woman scream about an hour after Chenet's departure, while another local resident claimed to have witnessed a disturbing scene on the mountain just one day prior to Chenet's disappearance. She described seeing a man forcibly attacking a woman in a nearby area where the crime ultimately took place. Additionally, forensic experts examined the crime weapon and found male DNA evidence on it. Despite checking the Georgian police database, no match was found. The samples were subsequently sent to all 194 Interpol member states to check for potential matches in their national databases. Witness interviews revealed that Chenet had no known enemies, disputes, or associations with questionable individuals. This led investigators to consider the possibility that she was a random victim of a crime with an unknown motive. The police conducted a thorough investigation, collecting and analyzing DNA samples from several dozen potential suspects. After an exhaustive and meticulous process, they were able to narrow down the list of potential perpetrators and ultimately identified a DNA match. 40 days after the death of Chenet Brooke Edwards, Georgia police issued the following statement based on the evidence obtained during the investigation, including testimony, surveillance tapes, genetic tests, and other evidence. A man born in 1988 was arrested on September 8 this year as the defendant in accordance with the decision of the court. The detainee was Georgian citizen Rafael Mirsakulov. His lawyer told reporters that Mirsakulov denies all the charges against him, namely robbery and taking the life of Chenet Brooke Edwards. He pleads not guilty. On September 10, 2021, the Tbilisi court refused to release Mirsakulov on bail while he was awaiting trial in custody. Police officers, in addition to the irrefutable physical evidence they had obtained, also had a no less important testimony. It was a count that after the attack on Chenet Brooke Edwards, Mirsakulov returned home and told his brother and his wife about the crime, but warned them that if they told anyone about it, their young child would suffer the same fate as Chenet. In October 2021, the Edwards family published a letter describing what Chenet was like and thanking everyone for their support. In particular, they thanked Georgia for their financial assistance in repatriating Chenet's body and the Georgian people for their continued attention, love, and support during this difficult and tragic time. The first hearing on the case took place in February 2022. Under Georgian law, Mirsakulov faced 16 to 20 years in prison. He chose not to exercise his right to remain silent and pleaded guilty at the trial to robbery but denied the charge that he acted intentionally when he took Chenet's life. However, the prosecutor didn't think so. In his opinion, the number of stab wounds spoke to the defendant's intent to take the victim's life. He stabbed Chenet Brooke 13 times, including 5 in the neck, indicating intent to take her life. Moreover, after his knife broke, the defendant strangled the victim, the prosecutor said. The defense argued that Marsakulov was guilty of robbery, and his motive was to steal Chenet Brooke Edwards' iPhone 12. Marsakulov admitted his guilt and apologized to the victim's family, expressing remorse for his actions. According to his lawyer, Marsakulov has mental health issues and committed the crime in an abnormal state. Despite this, the court's psychiatric examination deemed Marsakulov sane, allowing for a real punishment to be imposed. The prosecutor pointed out that traces of strong drugs were found in Marsakulov's blood after his arrest, but this did not excuse his guilt. In a tearful statement, Marsakulov took full responsibility for his actions, apologizing to the Edwards family in the country and vowing not to appeal his sentence. The incident ended in tragedy, with Chenet losing her life and Marsakulov facing punishment for his crime. The sentencing of Rafael Marsakulov was delayed at the request of the prosecution to allow the victim's brother, Tyson Edwards, to attend. The Edwards family released a statement pleading with the Georgian justice system to impose a life sentence on Marsakulov. During the March 9, 2022, trial, Marsakulov was found guilty. Tyson Edwards, on behalf of the family, once again requested a life sentence for the defendant. Marsakulov, 33, received the maximum sentence allowed under Georgian law, 20 years in prison. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Diana Maria Kier Lopez Pinel. Diana Maria Kier Lopez Pinel, born on August 12, 1998, in Madrid, came from a wealthy and close-knit family. Her parents, Diana Cristina Lopez Pinel and Juan Carlos, had a sister named Valeria. However, their family life was disrupted in 2013 when her parents divorced, leading to depression and competition between the sisters for their mother's attention. Despite the divorce, their father remained involved in their lives and would visit them regularly during vacations. Diana, her mother, and sister often spent their summers in the small coastal town of Poder do Carmo, which had a population of around 10,000. In the summer of 2016, they returned to their favorite vacation spot, Alba do Carmo, to enjoy the peace and beauty of the area. On the evening of August 21st, Diana told her mother that she was going to meet her friends at Valle-Inclán Park to celebrate the Feast of the Virgin Carmen. It seemed like it would be just another typical summer evening. Diana regularly walked in Valle-Inclán Park, which was close to her family's cottage. Her mother saw no problem with this and let her go there again. That evening, Diana had a good time with her friends, unaware that it would be their last encounter. After saying goodbye to her friends, she met Paso Diana Ariel, an acquaintance, near a pizzeria she often visited. They parted ways around 2:30 a.m., making Paso Diana Ariel the last person to see Diana that night. The morning of August 22, 2016, was a nightmare for Diana's mother, Maria Kier Lopez Pinel. When Diana didn't return from a party, her mother became alarmed. The girl's phone was off or out of range, and her prolonged absence was unusual. Based on the information Diana's mother provided, it seemed that Diana didn't have any significant emotional or mental health issues, despite experiencing her parents' divorce. Maria immediately reported her daughter missing to the police at 8:30 a.m. Police investigated the mysterious disappearance of Diana Maria Kier Lopez Pinel. Diana, also known as Diana, vanished without a trace, leaving behind only cryptic clues. The last messages she sent were to a friend in Madrid via WhatsApp, in which she described being stalked by a stranger who would shout strange phrases, frightening her. These messages were her final contact with the outside world. To retrace Diana's steps, the police searched the road she would have taken to get home. Along the way, they found a black hairband, similar to the one Diana wore that night. Unfortunately, it was the only clue found at the scene of her disappearance. Investigators had no other leads, despite questioning Diana's friends, who couldn't provide any helpful information. The lack of CCTV cameras on the last part of Diana's journey made it even more challenging. The dimly lit and deserted street had few landmarks, including some garages and a rundown Boomerang nightclub. Some witnesses reported seeing Diana exit a car with 3 men, then get into another car that drove her away from the port. However, these accounts were not corroborated. Investigators explored 2 main theories. First, that Diana was kidnapped by someone she knew, and second, that she was attacked by a stranger. Diana's mother even proposed a third possibility, that her daughter was taken away on a boat. Diana's friend and ex-boyfriend claimed that she met a man from Morocco and they purchased hashish together. However, this information only added to the mystery of her disappearance. The media reported that the clothes Diana wore that evening were found, but her mother denied this, stating that no such discovery was made. Furthermore, Diana left her credit card and identification behind, which suggested that she did not intentionally run away. This, along with other circumstances, indicated that her disappearance was not voluntary. Diana's disappearance remained a mystery despite efforts to solve it. The media soon revealed that Diana had argued with her mother just before she vanished, which led to reports of Diana having a nervous breakdown and requiring medical attention. Her younger sister Valeria, 16, was also hospitalized with similar symptoms. To avoid further conflict and litigation, the father was granted custody of Valeria. This decision was made on September 1st to prevent more tension in the community, which was already on edge due to Diana's disappearance. The father and daughter left town, fueling rumors that they were hiding something important. According to Diana's friends, it was not unusual for the sisters to run away from home, especially Valeria. The family had complicated relationships with frequent quarrels between the mother and daughters. Diana's mother was criticized for being overly anxious when Diana failed to return home, considering Diana had often left home on Wednesdays without incident. However, the family's actions raised suspicions when they canceled a scheduled press interview, citing emotional distress at the possibility of never seeing their daughter again. New information emerged on September 11th, contradicting the mother's claim that Diana didn't have mental health issues. It was revealed that Diana had gone missing for 3 days in April, and her mother had not reported it to the police. Diana would often turn off her phone to upset her mother, and had expressed a desire to no longer live with her. The letters exchanged between Diana and Valeria, published in the press, revealed that both sisters struggled with serious emotional issues. Valeria's problems were severe enough to land her in the hospital multiple times in the past year, including an incident where she had to have her stomach pumped due to a prescription drug overdose. With the investigation into Diana's disappearance stalled, prosecutors have shifted their focus to investigate the alleged abuse of Valeria, the youngest daughter of the Lopez Panel family. Meanwhile, the search for Diana continues at full speed, with investigators working intensively to uncover the truth about her disappearance. Forensic experts analyzed various items belonging to Diana, including her toothbrush, comb, computer, diary, and prescription drugs, but found no leads. They also questioned her acquaintances, such as a Moroccan man she had a brief relationship with, but, again, no conclusive results. Despite extensive searches in the surrounding areas, the investigation remained stagnant. The search efforts focused on the mountains, forests, rivers, and lakes near the disappearance site, but Diana's phone signal was last detected in the Tarragon area, 13 miles away from her family's location, around 3 a.m. on the night of her disappearance. 72 days passed with no resolution, and all leads remained unconfirmed. However, the police did find a phone matching Diana's, which her father confirmed belonged to her. In a surprising twist, Diana's Facebook profile was activated 2 months after her disappearance, prompting friends and relatives to notify the police and provide screenshots. The remind password function had been used to bypass entering profile login details, leading to two possible explanations. Diana might have forgotten her password, or an attacker was attempting to access her profile. Unfortunately, Diana's phone, which could have held crucial clues, failed to provide any insights into her mysterious disappearance. On November 10, 2006, investigators finally identified the driver of the car in which Diana was last seen. Significantly, this individual had a prior record of human trafficking charges. However, details about his potential involvement in Diana's disappearance were kept under wraps to avoid jeopardizing the ongoing investigation. A pivotal incident occurred on December 25, 2017. A girl was accosted by a man who demanded her phone and threatened her with a weapon. The frightened victim screamed for help, and a passing couple rushed to her aid, rescuing her from the assailant who tried to drag her into a car. After the victim reported the incident to the police, providing a description of the attacker and their license plate number, officers arrested 41-year-old Jose Enrique Abinay, also known as Elo, the next morning. A background check revealed that Abinay had a prior criminal record and a surprising connection to a previous case. He was the same driver detained in 2016 for suspicion of kidnapping Diana Kier, but was released due to his wife's alibi. Further questioning of Abinay and his wife led to a breakthrough. The wife confessed to previously lying, stating that her husband was not at home on the night of Diana's disappearance and did not return until 4 a.m. Under pressure, Abinay finally admitted to accidentally hitting Diana with his vehicle and fearing the consequences, disposing of her body rather than reporting the incident to the police. Jose's original story changed when he confessed to kidnapping and murdering Diana. He claimed that he went to the beach to collect gasoline from abandoned cars and came across Diana there. Jose kidnapped Diana, attempted to sexually assault her, and eventually strangled her. Diana Kier's disappearance was a long and distressing ordeal for her family and those who followed the case. The nearly 500-day investigation, accompanied by relentless media speculation, only added to her loved one's suffering. The unfounded accusations against Diana's parents further complicated and hindered the investigation. Nevertheless, through diligent investigation and the testimony of a second victim, investigators gathered sufficient evidence to identify the perpetrator. Diana will be fondly remembered by her loved ones as a vibrant and lively young woman who tragically crossed paths with a violent criminal. Her story highlights the importance of unity in combating crime, ending impunity, and ensuring the safety of all citizens. Unfortunately, Diana's body was hidden by the perpetrator, who refused to disclose its location for a long time. Eventually, after much effort from family and friends, they were finally able to locate her remains in an abandoned warehouse's well in January 2018. This allowed them to give Diana a proper farewell and burial. As for the perpetrator, Jose, he was sentenced to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 35 years. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Kelly Clayton. Thomas "Tom" Clayton, a notable figure in Elmira, New York, played professional hockey for the Elmira Jackals in the United Hockey League, 2 tiers below the National Hockey League. As a result of his prominent role on the Jackals, Tom enjoyed local celebrity status in Elmira. Known for his agitating style of play, Tom would often provoke opposing players through verbal sparring or physical confrontations on the ice. This assertive and confident demeanor extended beyond the rink, as Tom fearlessly stood up for himself and defended his interests in his daily life. His on-ice reputation as a formidable player preceded him, warning others that he was not one to be easily intimidated. In addition to being aggressive, Tom was also known for his good looks, which made him a magnet for women. Wherever he went, he would use his charm to get what he wanted, never having to pay for a drink or dinner. As a popular hockey player, he was living a life of luxury, enjoying all the perks that came with his fame. Among the many women who came in and out of Tom's life, one person stood out: Kelly Stange. She was different from the others he had met. Born in West Elmira, Kelly had a bold and sassy personality. Her passion for country music took her to Nashville, where she attended college, hoping to become a teacher. After graduating, Kelly's plans took an unexpected turn, and she moved to Las Vegas, Nevada, where she started a new chapter in her life as a cocktail server and model. During the Christmas holiday, Kelly went back home to celebrate with her family and attended a hockey game in Elmira, where she met Tom Clayton. His good looks and skill on the ice caught her attention. After the game, Kelly and Tom ran into each other at a bar, and they instantly connected. Their chemistry was palpable. Although Kelly's friends and family had some reservations about Tom because of his occasional inappropriate behavior, Kelly remained steadfast in her commitment to their relationship. She would defend Tom, saying he was just joking when he made offensive comments, and her love for him blinded her to his flaws. Eventually, Kelly and Tom got married, but unfortunately, Tom suffered a career-ending injury while playing hockey just a year later. After his hockey career, Tom took a regular job at ServPro, a disaster cleanup company, which provided him with a stable income to support his family. Meanwhile, Kelly dedicated herself to caring for their two children, Charlie and Colin, and creating a loving home for them. To outsiders, the Claytons seemed like the perfect family. Tom and Kelly appeared to have everything: a successful marriage and two kids. They lived in a mountain home that Kelly loved. However, their lives took a drastic turn in September 2015. A devastating event would shatter their seemingly perfect existence. On September 29, 2015, Tom went to his friends Greg and Linda Miller's house to play poker after work, leaving Kelly alone with the children. When he returned home from the game, he made a disturbing discovery. Kelly lay dead on the kitchen floor, covered in blood. Tom was overcome with panic and immediately called 911. The dispatcher told Tom to give his wife, Kelly, CPR, but Tom, overcome with grief, told the dispatcher that it was too late to help her. At around midnight, a police officer arrived at Tom and Kelly's house. When the officer entered the kitchen, he was shocked by what he saw. Kelly was lying on the floor, dead, with a badly injured face, clearly the victim of a violent attack. There was blood everywhere, making for a horrifying scene. The officer's first priority was to take Tom out of the house and away from the scene. Once they were outside, the officer asked Tom what had happened. Tom said he didn't know the details, explaining that he had come home to find Kelly like that, and his daughter Charlie had told him that there was a burglar in the house. The officer cautiously examined Tom's hands to check for signs of a struggle or any evidence that might suggest Tom was involved in the attack. However, he found nothing unusual. Given the severity of the situation, the officer requested backup. A paramedic soon arrived and confirmed that Kelly Clayton had died. The brutal nature of her death led the police department to launch a thorough investigation. As officers cordoned off Tom and Kelly's home as a crime scene, Tom called Kelly's sister, Kim, to break the devastating news of Kelly's passing. Kim, in shock, rushed to the scene with their mother, Liz. When they arrived, they were met with crime scene tape and flashing patrol car lights, which only heightened their fear and anxiety. Desperate to locate Kelly, Kim and Liz rushed towards the ambulance, hoping to find paramedics trying to save her. However, the officers on the scene refused to let them get close, explaining that Kelly's body was unviewable due to her catastrophic injuries. Kelly's death and the unrecognizable state of her body devastated Kim and Liz, leaving them heartbroken. They burst into tears, their anguished screams filling the air. As the coroner's van arrived, Kim, Liz, and the officers joined hands to pray for Kelly's soul as her body was placed in a body bag and loaded into the van. As the night wore on, the crime scene investigators thoroughly searched Kelly and Tom's house and property, but found no new leads pointing to a suspect. Despite their diligent efforts, they found nothing. The investigators were unable to recover a murder weapon at the scene. But based on Kelly's injuries, they concluded that the weapon was likely small and light. The attack on Kelly occurred while she was peacefully sleeping in the master bedroom on the second floor. The attacker struck her with a blunt object. After being hit, Kelly tried to escape and sought refuge in Charlie's bedroom. A large amount of blood was found in that room, suggesting that Kelly had barricaded herself inside. However, the attack continued, as evidenced by a hole in the landing wall, which appeared to have been caused by Kelly's body being pushed down the stairs. After falling down the stairs, Kelly got up and made her way to the kitchen, where the suspect caught up to her and attacked her again in a violent encounter. The suspect brutally bludgeoned Kelly in the head and face, inflicting severe injuries that ultimately led to her death. Tom Clayton informed the first officer at the scene that his daughter Charlie had reported a robber in the house. However, the investigators who searched the property found no signs of forced entry and no evidence of theft. Furthermore, Kelly's expensive jewelry was still present and untouched, and the safe was intact. Given the brutal nature of Kelly's death, the detective initially suspected a domestic violence dispute. Despite this, Tom Clayton claimed to have an alibi, stating that he was playing poker at his friends Greg and Linda Miller's house for the entire night, which would have made it impossible for him to have committed the murder if his claim was true. When the police questioned Tom and Kelly's neighbor at the crime scene, he said he didn't think the couple had any problems and seemed happy. Later, detectives interviewed Tom about his wife's murder, and he repeated his alibi, saying he was playing poker at Greg and Linda Miller's house that night. The detectives then questioned the other players Tom mentioned, and they all confirmed that Tom was present. Although Tom had a solid alibi, the detectives found it strange that he was very calm considering the situation. They asked him repeatedly if he was involved in Kelly's murder, and Tom denied it every time. The detectives also needed to question Tom and Kelly's 7-year-old daughter, Charlie, who had witnessed the entire assault on her mother. Recognizing the importance of protecting Charlie's well-being, the detectives took a gentle approach. They started by doing fun activities with her, like playing board games, to make her feel comfortable before asking about her mother's murder. When they finally brought up the topic, they asked Charlie to describe what she had seen that night. Charlie said a robber wearing a mask, black shirt, and jeans had broken into their house. The intruder was carrying a white stick that looked like a metal pipe and used it to attack Kelly. Charlie remembered hearing Kelly shout, "Run, Charlie, run," as the attacker pushed her down the stairs. After Kelly was pushed downstairs, Charlie followed and saw the attacker beat her to death on the kitchen floor. Charlie believed her mother was dead, so she lay next to her and hugged her leg during the interview. Despite the traumatic event, 7-year-old Charlie seemed detached from the situation. Charlie told the detectives that the robber who hurt her mommy had the same eyes as her daddy. However, she was convinced her dad couldn't have done it because then who would take care of them? Based on the evidence found at the crime scene and Charlie's statements, the detectives believed that the intruder's intention was not theft, but to kill Kelly. After questioning Tom Clayton, the detectives charged him with second-degree murder in connection with his wife Kelly's death, based on his daughter's description of the intruder resembling him. Tom denied the second-degree murder charge and was released on bail, returning to the home where Kelly was killed. He cleaned up the house and continued to live there. Within a month of Kelly's murder, Tom started having affairs with multiple women, gambling in Atlantic City, and showed no signs of grief. The detectives grew suspicious of Tom's behavior, which they deemed unbecoming of a loving husband mourning the loss of his wife. Despite this, Tom maintained that he loved Kelly and would never harm her, even planning a second honeymoon with her. Tom claimed his GPS records on his work truck would prove he didn't get home until 12:35 a.m., but even after verifying this, detectives still suspected him of involvement in Kelly's murder. During their investigation, detectives questioned Greg and Linda Miller, with whom Tom played poker that night. They said Tom was quieter than usual and spent most of the night texting, but they didn't think he could hurt Kelly. The detectives also interviewed Kim, Kelly's sister, asking if she knew anyone who might want to harm Kelly. Kim mentioned Michael Beard, a close friend and co-worker of Tom's, who often helped him with tasks. Michael knew Tom's family, including Kelly and their children, and had even watched Charlie and Colin when Kelly needed to run errands. Michael had high praise for Kelly and the kids, calling them beautiful people. As well as working for Tom, Michael was also his landlord, since Tom owned the building where Michael lived with his family. Michael paid Tom a monthly rent of $11,000. But things went downhill when Michael got accused of drinking on the job. As a result, Tom fired him. This not only cost Michael his job, but also made his financial situation worse, since he was already behind on the rent he owed Tom. Tom's decision to fire Michael not only affected his job, but also put his home at risk. Tom started eviction proceedings, making Michael's financial struggles even harder. Michael found himself in a tough spot, facing both unemployment and the threat of losing his home. The detectives interviewed Michael Beard at the police station, seeking information about Kelly's murder. Michael expressed sadness over Kelly's death, but claimed he was at home all night. Linda Miller, who hosted the poker game where Tom was present on the night of Kelly's murder, remembered a peculiar incident. Tom had asked to use her cell phone, even though his own phone seemed to be functioning properly. According to Linda, Tom made the call at 10:53 p.m. Upon further inspection, Linda found that the call's details had vanished from her phone's records. It seemed that Tom had deliberately erased the number he called. The detectives obtained Greg and Linda Miller's cell phone records, which revealed the phone number Tom had dialed on the night of the murder. Tracing this number led them to Michael Beard. When the detectives discovered Tom Clayton had contacted Michael Beard on the night of his wife's murder, they brought Michael in for further questioning. Michael, however, continued to deny any involvement in Kelly's murder. The detectives then turned their attention to Michael's partner, Holly. She told them Michael had been out all night on the evening of the murder, leaving their house around 11 p.m. Moreover, Holly revealed that Tom Clayton had previously approached Michael with a proposition: burn down his and Kelly's house for $10,000 with the intention of collecting the insurance payout. Michael decided to confess to murdering Kelly after being confronted with the information. He admitted to killing Tom's wife Kelly, but claimed he did not receive the $10,000 payment they had agreed upon. In his signed confession, Michael outlined the original plan, which involved going to Tom's house and killing Kelly while the children were at their grandmother's. Tom had instructed Michael to use the gas cans in the garage to set the house on fire, allowing Tom to collect insurance payouts for the damage. However, Michael said he did not follow through with the arson and instead fled the scene. After killing Kelly, Michael took the police to the location of the murder weapon, a sledgehammer-type object that was found to have Kelly's DNA on it. He also led them to the area where he had discarded his bloody clothing. Mark Blanford, a friend of Michael Beard, came forward to the detectives and gave a statement about his encounter with Michael on the night of the murder. Michael had asked Mark to help him with a job, offering to pay him $500. Mark claimed he had no idea what the job was, assuming it was probably a drug deal. Mark said that Michael later told him he had to kill someone, and that after Michael got back in the car, he mentioned that the kids weren't supposed to be at home. Michael Beard was arrested and charged with first-degree murder in connection with Kelly Clayton's death. Detectives think that 7-year-old Charlie didn't see her father during the attack, but instead mistook the attacker for her father because of the way he was dressed. Kelly's husband, Tom, had a large life insurance policy on Kelly, which had recently been increased before her murder. Detectives believe the motive behind the murder was this policy, as Kelly would have received a significant portion of Tom's assets if they had divorced. Furthermore, detectives think Tom not only intended to kill his wife, but also wanted his children dead. This claim is supported by Michael Beard, who alleges that Tom confided in him about the planned murders. According to Michael, Tom told him that the children would be at their grandmother's house and instructed him to set the house on fire after killing Kelly. However, when Michael was instructed to set the fire, Tom knew the children would be at home, not at their grandmother's house. This information suggests Tom deliberately planned for his children's deaths, wanting to eliminate any reminders of his life with Kelly and start over as a single, child-free bachelor. Based on the evidence, it appears Tom's actions were driven by a desire to erase his past and start anew. Before his trial, Michael Beard retracted his confession, stating that he did not kill Kelly. Instead, he claimed to have entered the Clayton home and found her lying on the ground, covered in blood. As a black man in a house with a murdered white woman, Michael said he was fearful of being wrongly accused and did not want to be blamed for the crime, so he fled the scene without calling 911. Michael Beard alleged that his signed confessions were coerced, but in 2016, he was convicted and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. In a 2020 interview, Michael altered his story again, claiming that he arrived at the Clayton home on the night Kelly was killed and saw a man running from the scene who bumped into him and nearly knocked him down. However, this new statement raised several questions, including why he failed to mention this crucial detail at the start of the investigation. Mark Blanford pleaded guilty to a lesser charge of second-degree manslaughter for his role as a lookout during Michael Beard's murder of Kelly Clayton. In exchange for his guilty plea, Mark agreed to testify against Tom Clayton. Notably, Mark had a lengthy criminal record spanning over 30 years, but had never faced such severe charges before. At his sentencing, Mark expressed regret to Kelly's family and friends, apologizing for his involvement in her murder. During Michael Beard's trial for Kelly's murder, the prosecution presented testimony from several women who claimed to have had relationships with Tom Clayton while he was still married to Kelly. One of these women testified that Tom frequently disparaged his wife, describing her as lazy. However, when Tom's defense team responded, they argued that having extramarital affairs did not necessarily make him a murderer. Ultimately, the jury convicted Tom of second-degree murder, rejecting the defense's claims. Today, Tom's children are doing well in the care of their Aunt Kim, who is Kelly's sister. They have a strong support system, which enables them to move forward with their lives despite their mother's absence. As a tribute to Kelly's memory, a park was established in the playground where she would often take her children to play. Her son has even given a special name to one of the benches there, calling it Mommy's Bench. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Adrienne Robert. Adrienne Robert was born on January 4, 1983 in Brunswick, Maine. Adrienne graduated from Leavitt High School in 2001 and the University of Maine at Augusta in 2005. In 2007, she relocated from Maine to Clearwater, Florida. Those who knew Adrienne described her as a beautiful, kind-hearted person who always radiated happiness and vitality. With a bright outlook on life, she and her boyfriend Justin were preparing to start a new chapter together. Adrienne was living with her friend Jay in a rented house at the time. Her relationship with Justin was getting serious, and in July 2012, they found a new house where they planned to move in together. On the evening of July 13, 2012, Adrienne packed her belongings and decided to throw a farewell party to mark her departure. She told Justin that she and Jay were going to either a movie or a bar, and he couldn't join them because he had an urgent matter to attend to at the same time. Justin didn't mind Adrienne spending the evening with Jay, given that they were not only roommates, but also friends. Initially, Adrienne and Jay celebrated at home, reminiscing about happy memories over a few drinks. Later, they decided to continue the night elsewhere and headed to the Diamond Dolls strip club. At 3:34 a.m., Jay called 911, informing the operator that he had just returned home to find Adrienne unresponsive. He explained that they had been at a nightclub, but she had left earlier, and he stayed behind for a while. When he got back home, he found her on the bathroom floor, her eyes open but not breathing, with signs of a struggle suggesting a crime had taken place. The operator instructed Jay to focus and administer CPR on Adrienne, providing him with step-by-step guidance. Jay carefully followed the instructions, attempting to restart Adrienne's heart until the paramedics arrived. Sadly, by the time the ambulance arrived, Adrienne had passed away, and the medical team was unable to revive her in any way. She was officially declared deceased at the scene. The police investigation focused on two key questions: who was responsible for Adrienne Robert's death, and was her roommate involved in the crime? They began by conducting a thorough search of the house, meticulously examining every closet and searching under each bed to rule out the possibility that the perpetrator was hiding inside the residence. One of the first observations made by the detectives and forensic experts at the crime scene was the absence of any signs of forced entry on the front door. Adrienne's lifeless body was found on the bathroom floor, clad only in a bra. The fatal stab wound to her chest and signs of a fierce struggle in the bathroom suggested that she had desperately tried to defend herself. The fact that she was nearly naked led detectives to suspect that her killer was likely a man. A closer examination of Adrienne's bedroom yielded a puzzling discovery. A portion of her bedsheet had been deliberately cut off, raising questions about the motive behind this action. Detectives theorized that the perpetrator had attempted to destroy potential DNA evidence, possibly their own, which might have been present on the sheet. It was curious, however, that the culprit had not taken the entire sheet, as the remaining portion could still hold DNA traces. The investigators found a substance resembling seminal fluid and sent it to the lab for analysis. It was discovered that Adrienne's car was missing from the parking lot next to her house, suggesting that it might have been stolen by a criminal. The police launched an investigation, scouring the area for potential witnesses and issuing an all-points bulletin for Adrienne's car in an effort to crack the case. To piece together the events surrounding her death, detectives needed to reconstruct the final hours of Adrienne's life. However, their first priority was to break the devastating news to her family. The sudden and unexpected loss of their daughter sent Adrienne's parents into shock. They were consumed by grief, struggling to come to terms with the death of their beloved child. Meanwhile, Adrienne's boyfriend, Justin, was alerted to the tragedy the following morning when he saw the police cordon surrounding her house, and he immediately sensed that something was terribly wrong. The detectives told Justin that Adrienne had died the night before. They explained that it was common for criminals to return to the scene of the crime, and because of his close relationship with Adrienne, they needed to investigate him as a potential suspect. It's a standard practice to scrutinize those closest to the victim in cases like this. Later, the police found Adrienne's car a few blocks from her house, with the headlights on and the keys still in the ignition. This discovery only added to their suspicions, leading them to believe that the killer had used Adrienne's car to escape. To search for clues, forensic experts carefully searched the car's interior. Meanwhile, investigators reviewed CCTV footage to try to identify the person who had been driving Adrienne's car. Although there were no cameras in the exact area where the car was found, cameras on nearby buildings did capture some footage. The recordings revealed a man wearing shorts, a baseball cap, and long hair walking away from Adrienne's car around the time the 911 call was made. However, investigators were unable to track his movements further as he went in a different direction and disappeared from view. Police gathered additional information by interviewing witnesses. A neighbor reported seeing Adrienne and a man running on the sidewalk late at night, which was unusual given their attire. Adrienne was wearing a dress, not sportswear, and was holding her shoes in her hand. The man was not dressed for a run either, but it did not appear as though he was stalking Adrienne, as she did not scream or call for help. The investigators also questioned Adrienne's roommate, Jay, who claimed to have been with Adrienne at a club called Diamond Dolls on the night of the incident. According to Jay, they had a few drinks at home before heading to the club, where they met another man they didn't know. Jay stated that he remained at the club after Adrienne left. To verify Jay's account, the police investigated Diamond Dolls and reviewed the CCTV footage from the club. The footage confirmed that Jay and Adrienne arrived and left at the times Jay had described. Specifically, it showed that Jay left the club alone at 2:53 a.m., walked outside, crossed the parking lot, and headed towards his house. The footage also revealed that Adrienne left the club earlier at 1:38 a.m. Notably, Adrienne's attire changed between her arrival and departure from the club. When she arrived, she was wearing a dress and what appeared to be a jacket. However, when she left, she was only wearing a dress. It was later revealed that Adrienne had forgotten her jacket inside the club. 4 seconds after Adrienne left, a man in a baseball cap exited the club, chased after her, and returned the jacket she had left behind. After handing Adrienne the jacket, the two seemed to engage in conversation, but the content of their discussion remains unknown. After leaving the parking lot, the man followed Adrienne instead of going back to the club. They turned right onto a street that, as you can see, is relatively deserted with very few houses. It's unclear whether Adrienne felt threatened at this point, and we may never know for certain. By comparing the man captured on the club's CCTV footage with the man seen beside Adrienne's abandoned car, investigators determined that they were two different individuals. Given all the circumstances leading up to her death, they concluded that the likely perpetrator was the man caught on the club's CCTV, and the man in this recording was probably just a random passerby. The police were exploring every possible scenario to determine what had happened, and they were committed to providing Adrienne's parents with answers as soon as possible. When her family traveled to Florida to collect her belongings, the investigators met with Mark and Dolores, assuring them that they would exert every effort to identify and bring the perpetrator to justice. Adrienne's parents described her as a friendly person who got along with everyone, including her boyfriend Justin and roommate Jay, and didn't have any enemies. According to investigators, Adrienne's killer was likely a stranger to her. The lab results revealed that the killer had attempted to remove evidence by cutting a part of the sheet, but forensic experts still managed to find male DNA. The DNA was not only on the sheet, but also on Adrienne's body and the walls. When the police compared the DNA to their database, they were disappointed to find no matches. Despite this, they still had the DNA profile of an unknown male and CCTV footage from the club where Adrienne spent her last evening. At this stage of the investigation, detectives primarily relied on the footage as the main clue to crack the case. They re-examined the recordings, this time reviewing not only the nighttime footage, but also the daytime recordings, which yielded results. Approximately 8 hours prior to Adrienne's death, investigators identified the same man who was seen talking to Adrienne in the parking lot and left with her. The police now had a clearer image of his face. Moreover, they discovered how this unknown man arrived at the club. He took a taxi. The phone number on the taxi's body was visible on the recording, making it easy to identify the brand of the car. It was much simpler to identify the man now. The detectives traced the phone number that had ordered a taxi near Diamond Dolls, which was captured on footage, and discovered it belonged to Thomas Frederick. By comparing his driver's license photo with the CCTV footage image, detectives confirmed it was the same individual. Thomas Frederick had become the prime suspect in the case. To arrest him, the police required concrete evidence, as the camera recordings alone were insufficient. So they began secretly monitoring Frederick, careful not to spook him. They decided to obtain his DNA without his knowledge to avoid scaring him off. The officers kept Thomas Frederick under surveillance for a week and a half, waiting for the perfect moment to act. They followed him to work and staked out his house at night, patiently waiting for him to slip up and give them a lead. Their persistence paid off when Frederick carelessly discarded a cigarette butt on the road. The officers quickly collected it and sent it to the lab for DNA analysis. Their goal was to determine if Thomas Frederick was the same person who had left behind traces of evidence at Adrienne Robert's house. While awaiting the test results, the police continued to secretly monitor Frederick, concerned that he might flee the state once the highly anticipated lab report was released. As expected, the experts' conclusion was damning. The DNA found on the bedsheet, walls, and Adrienne's body all belonged to Thomas Frederick. With this incriminating evidence, the police arrested Frederick and took him into custody at the station. During the interrogation, the man explained that he frequently visits various clubs and bars where he usually makes new friends. When the police showed him a picture of Adrienne Robert, he claimed to have met her at Diamond Dolls, where she allegedly bought him a drink, and they danced and chatted together. According to Frederick, he went to work after leaving the club, but the CCTV footage contradicted his statement, showing that he had actually left with Adrienne. When the detectives highlighted this inconsistency, Frederick changed his story, saying that he and Adrienne walked together to the end of the street before going their separate ways. This convenient alibi seems suspicious, particularly coming from someone facing a potential life sentence. When asked if he had ever visited Adrienne's house, Frederick replied that he couldn't remember due to excessive drinking. This raises questions as to whether he was intentionally contradicting himself or had genuinely limited recall of that night's events. He recalled that after leaving the club, he and Adrienne went their separate ways at the end of the street. Although he remembered going to work after the club, he claimed to have no memory of being at Adrienne's house. The investigators were convinced he was lying, as they had a witness who had seen Adrienne running barefoot, holding her shoes, with Frederick chasing after her. When the investigators confronted Frederick with this evidence, he explained that Adrienne had asked him to walk her home. However, she suddenly said she was in a hurry and removed her shoes, taking off running. Frederick claimed he had no choice but to run alongside her, insisting that he was not pursuing her, but rather keeping her company. The detectives eventually grew tired of his inconsistent stories and accused him of attacking Adrienne. Frederick was informed that his DNA was found on the sheet, Adrienne's body, and several other items in her house. When he realized he couldn't deny his involvement, he claimed he had acted in self-defense. Now that his memory has returned, he stated that he and Adrienne had consensual sex at her house. Afterwards, Adrienne became unwell and vomited in the bathroom. The two then got into a fight, during which Adrienne allegedly pulled out a knife, threatened him, and tried to harm him. Frederick claims he exercised his right to self-defense, which ultimately resulted in Adrienne's death. According to him, he panicked and didn't know what to do, so he chose not to call 911 and instead fled the scene, believing he would be blamed for Adrienne's death. In January 2014, Thomas Frederick was charged with first-degree deprivation of life. During the trial, the prosecutor presented their account of that night's events. Adrienne and Jay had been drinking at home and then went to Diamond Dolls, where they were in a good mood. Thomas Frederick joined them at a table, and they chatted casually, thinking he was an ordinary person, just relaxing with them. The day after, Adrienne had to pack up her belongings and move into her new home with Justin. She chose to leave early, while Jay opted to stay behind at the club. Frederick saw an opportunity in this and secretly followed her. Adrienne didn't want him tagging along and tried to shake him off, but he was relentless. He pursued her all the way to her new house, and when she went inside, he broke in, snatched a knife from the kitchen, and carried out his sinister intentions towards Adrienne. According to the prosecutor, the injuries on Adrienne's body suggested that she did not consent to intercourse with Frederick. Fearing that she might report him to the police, he then decided to kill her. In an attempt to cover his tracks, he cut out a piece of the sheet that contained his seminal fluid, but the police were still able to find his DNA at the scene, including on Adrienne's body. Frederick then stole Adrienne's car keys, drove a short distance, and abandoned the vehicle. Mark and Dolores Robert have struggled to cope with life since the loss of their daughter. Thomas Frederick's defense team attempted to discredit Adrienne during the trial, claiming she had invited him to her home for consensual sex. However, this claim has no factual basis and appears to be a desperate attempt by the perpetrator to justify his presence in the victim's house. The undeniable fact is that DNA evidence points to only one person. Frederick's defense also argued that he acted in self-defense, citing the fact that Adrienne sustained a stab wound during the struggle. However, this argument was unsuccessful. The jury ultimately found Thomas Frederick guilty of first-degree murder and car theft. Although there was insufficient evidence to support the charge of forced intimacy by threatening Adrienne with a knife, Frederick's guilty verdict was a testament to the weight of the evidence against him. The court handed down a life sentence without parole to 25-year-old Thomas Hampton Frederick. Adrienne's father expressed his and his wife's elation upon learning that Frederick would spend the remainder of his life behind bars. Although this doesn't bring Adrienne back, he felt that justice had been served. He struggled to contain his emotions while in the same room as the man who took his daughter's life. Frederick showed no signs of sympathy or remorse, even when the jury delivered its verdict, and instead appeared very confident. Robert and his wife Dolores were overwhelmed with emotion as the verdict was read aloud in the courtroom. Contradicting their current sorrow, Robert reflected on his daughter Adrienne's zest for life, saying, "We were so happy. She had a passion for living, and her smile could light up a room. It's heartbreaking that we'll never experience that joy again." Adrienne's family expressed their gratitude to all who had supported them during this difficult time, including the police and the prosecutor, whose efforts had ensured the criminal received a fitting punishment. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Adam Strong. Many crimes unfortunately remain unsolved for various reasons. According to forensic experts, this often happens if not all theories are considered, or if one of the theories wasn't fully explored. Thus, grieving families sometimes never learn the secret of a loved one's disappearance or the cause of their demise. However, occasionally crimes are uncovered over time, often by complete chance. The investigation into the crime against teenage girl Rory Hatcha began with a call to a plumber due to a clogged sewer line, which led to the discovery of several brutal acts against schoolgirls. This case made quite a stir, and the apprehended criminal was found to be involved in a similar atrocity that happened 10 years ago. Although many believed that the police had caught a true serial predator who targeted young women, only 2 incidents were proven with great difficulty, despite the presence of ample evidence. On September 11, 2017, in the Canadian city of Oshawa, Ontario, a local fisherman spotted something horrifying in the city harbor. Floating in the water was a severely disfigured and decomposed human torso. The man immediately reported his find to the police, and the remains were soon retrieved and taken to the Forensic Medical Service for identification and necessary examinations. Experts immediately faced difficulties in identifying the body. It lacked limbs and a head, and it was practically gutted. They managed to determine only that the remains belonged to a young woman aged between 18 and 25 years. It was impossible to identify the victim by fingerprints, dental records, or distinctive features. However, a fragment of a tattoo was visible on the neck, but it was impossible to make out what it represented due to the advanced state of decomposition. There was only hope for a DNA analysis, but no matches were found in the existing database. Thus, law enforcement began to check the cases of all young women who had gone missing in recent months. Only in November of the same year, nearly 2 months after the gruesome discovery, was it established that the body belonged to 18-year-old high school student Rory Hache, who had disappeared in mid-August of the same year, about a month before the remains were found. At the time of her disappearance, the girl was pregnant. Over several weeks, divers thoroughly examined the harbor and the adjacent shoreline of Lake Ontario, but no other body parts, head, or limbs were found. It was also impossible to determine the time and cause of death. However, experts found that the body had numerous severe injuries inflicted while she was still alive. This led to the suspicion that the girl had been tortured over a long period before her life was tragically ended. The story took an unexpected turn 4 months later, when at the end of December, David Wood's family moved into the house at 19 McMillan Drive, Oshawa. They immediately noticed a strange, unpleasant smell, but their downstairs neighbor, a single 45-year-old man named Adam Strong, who lived in the other half of the house, assured them it was just a minor plumbing issue that he would fix in a few days. The neighbor tried to be friendly and communicated very politely, but there was something unsettling and off-putting about him. When David's wife brought him some homemade cookies as a welcome gesture, he didn't let her even step inside his apartment. Instead, he just stepped out into the hallway, closing his door behind him. She managed to notice that his living space was in terrible disorder, and the smell inside was simply foul. Adam took the cookies, thanked the new neighbor, and hurried off. Later, when the neighbors crossed paths in the yard, he apologized for not inviting her in, explaining that he was about to renovate and that his apartment was not looking its best at the moment. He again tried to be polite, but was noticeably nervous. For several days, as the Wood family settled in, they tried to ignore the smell. But on December 29th, they finally called a plumber due to a sewer blockage and the intensified stench. The problem seemed minor and easily fixable, but what the workers discovered in the pipes shocked even experienced forensic experts. The plumber named Sean Fenn, along with his partner, began to clear the blockage in the Wood family's apartment. Accustomed to unpleasant odors, they were surprised by how terrible it smelled inside. Soon they realized they needed to look 1 floor below and descended to Strong's apartment. Reluctantly, the man let the workers in, apologizing for the mess. The smell was even worse in this space, and when the plumbers reached the site of the blockage in the pipe, the stench became unbearable. Sean later confessed that in his many years of practice, he had never encountered anything so foul-smelling, but an even more nightmarish discovery awaited them when they decided to clear the pipe. At this time, the already nervous homeowner began to behave even more strangely. He did not step away and kept asking what the workers were going to do and how long it would take. He later justified his actions by saying he was simply curious, as he had never seen this process before. The specialists tried to ignore Adam's actions and questions, but soon they extracted more than 10 kilograms of flesh tangled with long hair and bone fragments from the pipes. Sean was horrified when he saw disfigured and partially decomposed human fingers among it all. The apartment owner made a surprised face, saying he had never seen anything more disgusting in his life, and then asked the plumbers if they had any idea how all this could have ended up in the sewer pipe. Fenn didn't want to speculate and decided to immediately call the police to sort everything out. He reported the horrific discovery, noting that he most likely stumbled upon human remains, provided the address, and waited for law enforcement to arrive, making sure that Adam did not touch anything or try to dispose of any evidence. The arriving officers immediately understood that Sean was right, and indeed, human flesh had been extracted from the pipes. When they decided to talk to the homeowner, they expected to hear any sort of fabrication as an excuse. But the man instead bowed his head and confirmed that the remains of a woman's body had been stuck in the pipe. If the police wanted other parts, they were in the freezer of his refrigerator. In the freezer, they found a severed head of a young woman packed in a plastic bag, along with limb fragments, obviously those that could not be flushed down the toilet. The house itself was a real dump where it seemed no one had ever cleaned. The kitchen was piled with dirty dishes, with rotting food remains. Trash littered the floor. Empty pizza boxes were scattered around. And among all this debris, there were numerous magazines of a specific adult sadomasochistic content. Also found in the apartment were intimate toys, gags, whips, handcuffs, and special devices for binding and hanging. Who is Adam Strong? Mr. Strong was immediately arrested and taken to the police station for questioning. The police were baffled, as this man had never been in trouble with the law before and was not on their radar. There was nothing on him. He had been living at 19 McMillan Drive in Oshawa for over 10 years, since early 2007, and none of his previous neighbors had ever complained about him. Adam Strong was born in 1972 in the small town of Cornwall, located in Stormont County, Ontario. There is very little information about his family and early years. He was single and had no children. He worked as a station operator at a local gas station and as a security guard on a film set. Those who knew him personally described him as a quirky and eccentric person who thought he was smarter than others. He loved to argue and prove his point until others agreed, but overall, he was not known to be confrontational. Upon reviewing the content of Adam's personal pages on social networks, law enforcement concluded that he was seriously interested in BDSM practices. He did not hide his inclinations and openly talked about it, posting related photos and videos. He never had a constant companion, but some of his former partners claimed that Strong was a true sadist and subjected them to intimate tortures, which ultimately led to their separation. Another peculiar hobby of his was writing reviews and feedback on adult films and magazines. Clearly, watching such materials was how Adam spent all his free time. Outwardly, he did not appear to be a criminal. He behaved calmly and composedly. Strong's residence was cordoned off and guarded as a crime scene. An initial superficial inspection suggested that a lot of work was ahead, and new findings could shock as much as the head found in the refrigerator. Notably, matching the evidence found, law enforcement immediately speculated that the discovered head, limbs, and flesh from the pipes could belong to Rory Hashi, whose torso was pulled from a water body 4 months earlier. This speculation was supported by a tattoo on the neck, and DNA analysis dispelled any last doubts. Blood-stained clothing and shoes of a young woman were found hidden in various rooms among piles of trash in Adam's house. Blood traces were also found on the bed in the bedroom, which turned out to belong to the missing schoolgirl. In addition, her blood splatters were on the walls, furniture, and even on the ceiling in the room. The kitchen was equipped with an actual dissection table on which the suspect likely dismembered and gutted the girl. Blood traces, skin particles, hairs, and bone fragments were everywhere, creating a horrifying sight that provoked nausea in those who inspected it. The bathroom was also in completely unsanitary conditions. Dirt, blood, and signs of brutal acts were everywhere. The toilet was dismantled and lying in a corner amidst trash. Clearly, Strong had tried to dispose of the body by flushing it down the sewer in parts, and when he realized there was a blockage, he attempted to fix it himself, but failed. Moreover, a large variety of sharp weapons was found in the house, which were likely used by Adam to dismember the girl's body. Some knives were still smeared with her blood. Semen traces of the apartment owner were also found on the body fragments retrieved from the refrigerator. Who was Rory Hash? Let's delve into who the victim was, how she ended up in the home of her perpetrator, and what happened to her. Rory Hash was born on July 9, 1999 in Oshawa, and was the only child of a woman named Shannon Dion. Her father left before she was born and took no part in her life. Rory grew up in a rather unique family. Her maternal grandfather was once the founder and leader of a motorcycle club called Satan's Choice, and was also known as a talented boxer with strong connections to the criminal underworld. Rory's uncle was a member of the Hells Angels bike club, led a daring lifestyle, and had his own legal troubles. Despite having such relatives, Rory's childhood could be described as peaceful and carefree. Her mother and grandmother did everything to provide for her, surrounding her with love and care. Rory was a good student, excelled in dance, and even won awards at competitions. People described her as a very intelligent, sensible, and open-hearted child. At the age of 13, Rory received an award as the Best Cadet of the Year in her local Army unit. However, at 15, she began to spiral. A friend introduced her to drugs, and she quickly became dependent. She began spending more time with dubious company, neglected her studies, and soon stopped attending school altogether. For about a year, her family tried to help her overcome her dependency by placing her in various clinics, but she relapsed each time, and the cycle would start over. At 17, she ran away from home and began to provide intimate services for money to afford illicit substances. It was then that Shannon sought help from a specialized service for teens with dependencies, which managed to send Rory to mandatory treatment. The efforts were not in vain, and Rory eventually returned to a normal life. She found work as a salesperson in a local shop and studied remotely to pass her exams and obtain a high school diploma, with hopes of attending college in the future. Moreover, Rory began a serious relationship with a boy named Anthony, and in the spring of 2017, they decided to move in together. In June 2017, she informed her mother that she was pregnant and planned to keep the baby. Rory was nearly 18 and mature enough, so her mother supported her decision. However, Shannon was unaware that her daughter had resumed using illicit substances. In mid-August, Rory met with local constable Christopher Crane at a shopping center. Crane had been monitoring her situation for the last 18 months, ensuring she wasn't falling back into bad company. That day, Rory confessed to him that she had relapsed into drug use and had lost her job a month earlier, agreeing to intimate exchanges for money or a fix. Crane was deeply concerned by her confession. He promised to help and asked her to wait a few minutes while he stepped away to urgently call a service to arrange Rory's hospitalization. However, when he returned, Rory had vanished, and the constable was unable to find her. The next day, Rory's mother and uncle brought her to the hospital after finding her incoherent from substance use. For some reason, the relatives did not stay with her but left her in the emergency room queue and stepped out for about an hour. Upon their return, they found that she had disappeared and she was never seen alive again. Surveillance footage showed that she simply got up, walked to the exit, and left the hospital. Her family filed a missing person report the following day, but despite extensive searches and the rapid spread on social media, no trace of her was found. Although it was never definitively established how she ended up in Strong's house, it is most likely that her desperate need for drugs led her there to provide intimate services to the man. Investigation begins after Adam immediately informed the police about the location of the remaining body parts. Investigators expected him to start confessing. However, once at the station, he became withdrawn and refused to answer questions. He remained calm and did not admit to any wrongdoing. Since there was no direct evidence linking him to the girl's death, he was only charged with desecration of a body. Despite his lawyer's efforts, the detainee was denied bail and remained in jail pending trial. The investigators didn't know how to approach him effectively and tried to provoke an emotional response to make him reveal himself during questioning. However, Strong was not easily manipulated and carefully avoided questions about how Hash ended up in his house and what he did to her. Meanwhile, he willingly talked about his love for bladed weapons and his extensive collection of knives. Searches continued in Adam's house, and in one room, hidden in a closet, a dirty hunting knife was found with dried skin fragments that appeared human. DNA testing revealed that the samples from the knife did not match Rory's, but belonged to another individual. Identifying the person took several months, but by July 2017, it was clear that the traces on the weapon were from a young woman named Candace Fitzpatrick, who had disappeared about 10 years earlier. Candace Fitzpatrick had much in common with Rory Hash. This teenager also struggled with substance dependence and legal issues, grew up in a troubled family, often ran away from home, and would disappear for months at a time. living with acquaintances and sustaining herself by exchanging her body for sustenance and illicit substances. She was born in 1989 and was 18 at the time of her disappearance. Her family did not immediately notice her disappearance and only reported her missing almost 2 years later, by which time it was too late to find any leads. Additionally, her lifestyle and social circle led many to assume she could have ended up anywhere. For 10 years, Candace's parents believed that she had run away, but hoped she would eventually return. However, the news from law enforcement in 2018 shattered their hopes of ever seeing their daughter alive again. It is notable that both victims of the suspect were the same age and bore a striking resemblance to each other. They looked almost like sisters. This led to the belief that the police had apprehended a serial predator, and while Candace and Rory were not his only victims, only the remains of the latter were found. When questioned about the second woman, Strong unexpectedly decided to bargain. He acknowledged his serious predicament and expressed a willingness to cooperate, but only in exchange for more comfortable living conditions. He demanded a private cell, a large TV, internet access, and even specified a menu of his preferred meals. The law enforcement officials were outraged by his audacity, but conceded to gain the information. Adam started his story by recounting his difficult childhood, detailing how he had been abused by his stepfather from the age of 5, and how he had started torturing and ending the lives of animals from the age of 7, finding physical pleasure in these acts. He also discussed his intimate preferences and lamented his inability to find a woman who shared his interests in this area. When the conversation turned to Rory, he described in detail and with apparent pleasure how he had dismembered her, expressing regret that his plumbing had failed him. However, the police were unable to secure a confession regarding her demise. Strong insisted that the woman had died from an overdose, and he had merely disposed of the body. When Strong was first asked about Candace, he was quite surprised, given that it had been 10 years. He tried to find out how the police had learned about her. Upon hearing about the pieces of flesh stuck to an old knife, he became somber and regretted not taking better precautions to ensure his own safety. He confirmed that he had met the woman, but claimed he had not ended her life. Nonetheless, the evidence found did not support his claims. In an attempt to evoke some semblance of sympathy or remorse, the police informed him that Rory was pregnant at the time of her death. However, Adam vehemently denied this. A detective noted that the pregnancy was in its early stages, so it might not have been visibly noticeable. But the criminal insisted he would have noticed. At this moment, the investigators realized that Strong would argue endlessly to prove his point, so they decided to provoke him into revealing more than he intended. They insisted that the victim was expecting, and he attempted to prove otherwise, claiming he had personally examined her and even held her reproductive organs in his hands, and there was nothing there. Caught up in his narrative and deeply recalling the process, he began to describe the details and his sensations, mentioning how the flesh was soft and warm, and at one point, he even spoke of feeling a pulsation. This led law enforcement to believe that the woman might have still been alive at that moment. Later, Adam tried to deny everything, but his statements had been recorded on camera and were presented in court. He did not disclose what he had done with Candace's body, and her remains were never found. Detectives also failed to learn about any other possible victims. During one of the last interrogations, Adam indifferently stated, "I don't know if it matters, but I would like my condolences to be passed on to the girl's parents." The defendant's lawyers insisted that their client was mentally ill, unable to be held responsible for his actions, and in need of medical care. The court faced the question of whether he was sane and could be held accountable, or if he truly belonged in a psychiatric facility rather than a prison. However, a psychiatric evaluation determined that despite certain disorders, the man was aware of his actions and thus could be held legally accountable. The trial of Adam Strong began in September 2020, 3 years after the death of Rory and 12 years after Candace disappeared. He was charged with 2 counts of ending lives as well as desecration of Rory's remains. Although he never admitted his guilt, the evidence found in his home and his confessions during interrogations left no doubt about his involvement in these heinous acts. 4 of Adam's former partners also testified, describing his cruelty and propensity for violence. According to the prosecution, the defendant lured both women to his home, promising them money for intimate services. Given his specific preferences and the evidence found on Rory's body, he immobilized his victim, tormented her for a long period, and likely ended her life during the ordeal, fearing that she would report him to the police. On September 4th, a signal from his mobile phone was detected near the city harbor, where he discarded the torso of the victim, hoping it would be carried away by the current. In April 2021, Adam Strong was found guilty of ending the lives of Candace Fitzpatrick and Rory Hash, as well as desecration of the latter's remains. He was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. The verdict didn't particularly disturb the criminal, who noted in his closing remarks that his prison cell was much better and more comfortable than his previous living conditions. 6 months after his sentencing, Adam unexpectedly confessed to the location of the first victim's remains. Following his directions, the search lasted several months until the police discovered human bones. DNA testing confirmed that the skeleton belonged to Candace Fitzpatrick, which was officially announced in conclusion. Investigators are almost certain there could be more victims in the Strong case, at least one more woman. Notably, when Adam was brought in for his initial interrogation, his personal items were confiscated, among which was a chain with 3 rings. He later asked for this item to be returned, noting that the rings meant a lot to him and he did not want to lose them. Subsequently, relatives of Rory and Candace identified 2 of the rings as belonging to their daughters, but the 3rd ring remains unidentified. December proved to be the most challenging month of the year for Kier and her family. Despite their efforts to infuse the holiday spirit into their home with decorations, gingerbread baking, and caroling, Kier couldn't shake off the sadness in her eyes. She held on to hope, awaiting Santa's arrival, yet deep down, she knew the greatest gift would never return. On what should have been Nadine's 32nd birthday, Phoebe, her sister, honored her memory with a heartfelt video tribute, concluding with Kier singing a song dedicated to their beloved mother. For Claire, life without Nadine was an endless cycle of torment, haunted by nightmares and memories. Daniel's name was taboo in their household, and David shared in their despair. Despite Christmas passing, grief shrouded them, unable to fill the void left by Nadine's absence. On January 14, 2020, Daniel faced court proceedings via video call, his lawyer requesting a psychiatric evaluation, approved by Judge David Kennedy. Daniel confessed to the murder, blaming intoxication from substances consumed that fateful night. The trial, overseen by Judge Michael Magram and a jury of 7 men and 5 women, was marked by prosecutor John O'Kelly's presentation of damning evidence, detailing Daniel's cruelty towards Nadine. Throughout the 3-week trial, Nadine's family faced the painful reality in the courtroom, while Kier chose to spend some days at home with her granddaughter. Daniel's lack of remorse, evident in his fake displays of affection towards his mother, disgusted Claire. Testimonies from the intensive care unit nurse painted a grim picture of Nadine's condition, further solidifying Daniel's guilt. Throughout it all, Daniel never offered an apology to Nadine's family, leaving Claire disillusioned by his insincerity. The chilling echoes of mutilated words reverberated mercilessly down the cold, shadowy corridors, each syllable plunging Claire's soul deeper into an abyss of agony. Dr. Linda's relentless discourse stretched over 2 grueling hours, meticulously detailing every gruesome injury inflicted upon Nadine. With each description, the weight of the brutality bore down heavily upon Claire's heart, a relentless assault on her senses. As Dr. Linda's voice pierced through the air, Daniel remained eerily composed, his demeanor untouched by the harrowing accounts laid bare before him. It was as though the suffering of Nadine and her shattered family were mere trifles to him, inconsequential in the face of his own self-absorption. Refusing to acknowledge his guilt, Daniel's defiance only served to amplify Claire's anguish. His steadfast denial, devoid of remorse or empathy, cast him further into the depths of his own depravity. Despite the damning verdict that condemned him to a lifetime behind bars, Daniel's indifference persisted, a stark reminder of the darkness that dwelled within him. But even as the gavel fell and justice was seemingly served, the wounds of Nadine's family festered, raw and unhealed. The leniency of Irish law, offering a mere 18 years for a life extinguished, felt like a cruel mockery, a mockery that Claire and Nadine's loved ones could not accept. In the unforgiving confines of Whitfield Prison, Daniel found himself marked for retribution, a target among predators hungry for vengeance. Isolated from his fellow inmates for his own safety, he remained defiant, his arrogance unyielding even in the face of imminent danger. Yet, fate's relentless hand struck again within the walls of Midlands Prison, where Daniel became the victim of another inmate's brutal assault. Hospitalized and scarred, he bore the physical remnants of his own malevolence, a grotesque reminder of the pain he had inflicted upon Nadine and those who loved her. Nadine's story, a tragic testament to the horrors of domestic violence, reverberated far beyond the shores of Ireland. Born in Arlo, a beacon of hope on the southeastern coast, her light was extinguished far too soon, leaving behind a legacy of sorrow and a family torn asunder by grief. In the summer of 2012, three sisters, Phoebe, Tanith, and Kayla, embarked on a journey of adventure. Among them was Nadine, a captivating 26-year-old woman with plans to explore the wonders of Australia. With a heart brimming with anticipation, Nadine looked forward to a vacation filled with thrilling escapades, sports, and the prospect of forging new friendships. Nadine's essence radiated a unique charm that captivated those around her. Her laughter and radiant smile had a way of enchanting everyone she encountered. Despite her outgoing nature, Nadine harbored a sensitive soul, always seeing the goodness in people. She treasured her family deeply, finding solace and support in their love. Photography became Nadine's passion as she sought to capture fleeting moments of beauty in the world. What began as a hobby soon blossomed into a successful career where Nadine used her talents to enhance the beauty of others. In matters of the heart, Nadine treaded cautiously, cherishing her independence and relishing the company of friends. However, fate intervened when she crossed paths with Daniel, a reserved yet intriguing man from Dublin. Despite their stark differences in demeanor, Nadine found herself drawn to Daniel's piercing gaze and quiet strength. Their connection deepened as they explored the exotic landscapes of Australia together, sharing intimate moments and dreams beneath the sun-kissed skies. Watching Daniel conquer the waves while surfing, Nadine saw admiration and affection reflected in his eyes. Despite the geographical distance and the mysteries surrounding Daniel's life in Dublin, their bond grew stronger with each passing day. Nadine and Daniel's time together in Australia was a symphony of enchantment, promising a love that transcended boundaries. Their connection blossomed swiftly, although Nadine regarded it as a playful flirtation with no strings attached. Phoebe, Nadine's younger sister, was the first to be informed, followed by their mother, Claire, who quickly discerned the casual nature of the relationship. In June of 2013, Nadine returned home bearing unexpected news. She was pregnant with Daniel's child. Despite their attempts to forge a proper family, their relationship floundered, and Nadine found herself navigating the journey of motherhood alone when she gave birth to their daughter, Kier, in November of the same year. Phoebe stood steadfastly by her side, offering support and becoming a guiding presence in those early, challenging days of motherhood. Nadine's pregnancy marked a profound turning point in her life. Despite the dissolution of her relationship with Daniel, she embraced her role as a mother and found new purpose. Phoebe's unwavering support was instrumental during this period of transition. Nadine's story, though tinged with tragedy, is a testament to the power of love and familial bonds. Disappointed by her relationship with Daniel, Nadine longed for a stable and loving environment for her daughter. However, Daniel showed no signs of maturing into a responsible father figure. While Nadine tirelessly worked to provide for Kier, Daniel remained stagnant, refusing to take on the responsibilities of parenthood. In 2016, desperate to create a sense of family for Kier, Nadine made a final attempt by renting a house where they could all live together. However, Daniel's failure to follow through shattered Nadine's hopes for reconciliation. It was a pivotal moment for Nadine, as she came to terms with the reality of Daniel's absence and the broken promises that had plagued their relationship. Despite the pain and disappointment, Nadine emerged stronger, guided by the love for her daughter and the unwavering support of her sister. In the end, Nadine's journey was not defined by the failures of her relationship with Daniel, but by her resilience and determination to create a better life for herself and her daughter. Although Nadine and Daniel had separated, she did not lose hope that Kier would be able to keep in touch with her father. Unlike Nadine, Claire knew that Daniel wouldn't change. His only passion was boxing, and his family and daughter were not important to him. Despite all the difficulties, Nadine stayed strong. She continued to take care of Kier, giving her the love and support that she herself had not received from her father. Even though her daughter grew up without a father, she had an example of a strong and ambitious mother who taught her to never give up. Claire suggested that Nadine go to Rome to celebrate her birthday. The trip took place in October 2019. Arriving in Rome, going out on the terrace and enjoying the air filled with the smell of coffee and fresh pastries, Nadine confessed to her mother that she was going through a difficult period in her life. Her relationship with Daniel did not lead to anything good. Nadine did not need him and was good at being a mother. She liked her job, her home, and was proud of her achievements. Soon, Nadine was offered a job as a model. At that moment, she saw her future as promising and happy. Back in Ireland, Nadine was disappointed to learn that Daniel continued to make empty promises to visit Kier. One day, when Daniel was supposed to give Nadine money for their daughter, he asked for a meeting. Nadine immediately suspected that it was just an excuse to meet her and not Kier, but she could not refuse. At the same time, Nadine did not want to ruin Daniel's image in Kier's eyes. She still had hope to create a real family, although it seemed more and more impossible every day. Coming up with new excuses for the absence of her father, Nadine tried to protect her baby from disappointment and pain. She didn't want her daughter to suffer from Daniel's irresponsibility and ignorance. Despite this, Daniel did not want to break up with Nadine and let her go. He was afraid that she might start dating other men. Because of this, Nadine was forced to hide her personal life from him in order to avoid his constant control and threats. By the end of 2019, Nadine's life began to change. She left behind her relationship with Daniel. Despite this, Nadine looked forward to the future with hope and started dating a guy from Turkey. However, her attempts to keep this relationship a secret from Daniel were in vain. He found out about her new partner and was angry and furious. Unable to come to terms with the loss of control over Nadine, Daniel began to stalk her, turning her life into a nightmare. On December 5th, tired of the constant threats and insults, Nadine texted Daniel. She made it clear to him that their relationship was over and demanded that the harassment stop. Nadine firmly believed that this would put an end to this exhausting and tiring relationship. On December 13th, Nadine asked Daniel to babysit Kier as she was going to celebrate her aunt's birthday at a local pub. They agreed that Daniel would stay with Kier at Nadine's house while she spent time with her family. Daniel and Nadine lived in different cities. Daniel lived in London, and Nadine lived in Wicklow. On the night of December 14th, Daniel called Nadine several times at 11:57 p.m. and at 1:26 a.m., but there was no answer. Eventually, he sent her a message asking her to come back. Soon after Nadine returned home, she quickly changed her clothes, but what happened next remains unclear. However, we know that Daniel attacked Nadine and scared her 6-year-old daughter, Kier. One of the neighbors, Ayla Klenovich, heard the noise and screams, went to the house, and saw the open door to Nadine's apartment with the light on. she decided to check what was going on there. At the doorstep, Camila was met with a harrowing sight. Nadine lay sprawled on the floor of the hallway, with Daniel looming over her, his face twisted in a mixture of rage and panic. Overwhelmed with horror, Camila rushed back to her apartment, her trembling hands immediately dialing Nadine's family to relay the dreadful truth. As Claire listened to the tale, her demeanor turned icy, a whirlwind of unsettling thoughts racing through her mind, a foreboding sense settling in. Meanwhile, Daniel, consumed by his fury, fled the scene in his Volvo, leaving behind a haze of dust and the lingering stench of blood. Upon bursting into Nadine's apartment, a grisly scene unfolded before Claire's eyes. The walls of the hallway splattered with blood like strokes of an artist's brush, shattered glass and mirrors reflecting the gruesome reality of what transpired. Yet, this was only the beginning. At 9:50 a.m., Claire, Phoebe, and Kyle entered the kitchen, only to be met with a gut-wrenching sight. Nadine's lifeless body lay before them, torn and devoid of life. Simultaneously, some 20 miles away in the town of La, Daniel's recklessness met its end as his car careened into a ditch. Emerging from the wreckage, Daniel appeared dazed, his eyes vacant, his trembling form coated in blood. Confessing to a bewildered witness, he spoke in a voice laden with despair, admitting to the heinous act, his words echoing like a plea for absolution. As Daniel was whisked away to the hospital in an ambulance, his murmurs of love for Nadine hung in the air, as if he sought forgiveness in his darkest hour. Meanwhile, chaos reigned in Nadine's apartment. Stepping through the threshold, paramedics and police officers were met with the thick scent of blood. The scene before them, a testament to the brutality that unfolded within. Among them, paramedic Ian Clark was struck by the extent of the devastation. Broken dishes, shattered glass, and bloody footprints painted a grim portrait of a violent crime. Phoebe and Kyle, filled with grief and confusion, she lay unconscious, her body unrecognizable. An ambulance rushed Nadine to St. Vincent's Hospital, where she was admitted to the intensive care unit at 10:58 a.m. Doctors noted severe injuries to Nadine's head, neck, and chest, expressing concern over her condition, especially upon discovering 64 additional injuries of unknown origin on her body. Despite multiple blood transfusions, Nadine's critical condition remained stable. Claire, refusing to lose hope, stood vigilantly by Nadine's side, holding on to the belief that her daughter would return home. She surrounded Nadine with familiar belongings, including photographs, perfumes, and toys, hoping to provide comfort and support during this ordeal. Though unsure of what lay ahead, Claire was determined to weather the storm alongside her daughter, convinced that love and care would see them through. On December 16th, as Nadine fought for her life, Daniel faced a court appearance, ultimately being remanded into custody pending further trial. Later that afternoon, Claire accompanied Nadine for a follow-up examination of her cerebral cortex, praying for her daughter's strength to persevere. Tragically, on December 17th, between 3 and 4 p.m., Nadine drew her final breath, never regaining consciousness. Her most severe injuries proved fatal. The Irish police colonel, Dean McCarthy, deemed this violent crime one of the most heinous he had encountered. Dr. Linda Mogan, the chief state pathologist, conducted Nadine's autopsy at the city funeral home on December 18th. Left alone with her thoughts, Claire grappled with unanswered questions, struggling to comprehend the reasons behind the tragedy. The following day, Daniel recounted the harrowing details of the event. In the narrative of the assault, he recounted how he struck her and utilized the charger cord to strangle her. Initially, he targeted Nadine, delivering blows to her head despite her attempts to resist. Daniel persisted, employing various violent methods, including stabbing and strangling Nadine with the cord. Throughout the ordeal, Kier, Nadine's daughter, cried out, pleading with her father to cease the violence and spare her mother's life, but her pleas went unanswered. Despite Nadine's desperate struggles, Daniel's strength prevailed, and he continued the assault until morning. A funeral service was held on December 22nd at St. Mary and Peter's Church in Arlo, Nadine's hometown. Over 1,000 mourners gathered to bid farewell to her, with the church overflowing and hundreds more watching, via live broadcast. 6 individuals solemnly carried Nadine's casket, adorned with scarlet velvet roses, resembling Snow White, peacefully at rest. In the front row, Nadine's mother, Claire, struggled to contain her tears, her eyes filled with love and admiration for her daughter. Surrounding her were grieving relatives and friends, openly expressing their sorrow. David, Nadine's father, approached the altar, his voice trembling with emotion and tears streaming down his face as he placed one of Nadine's handbags beside her casket, a poignant reminder of her elegance and charm. A family friend, Kyle, held a trembling photo of Nadine and Kier, radiating happiness and affection. Meanwhile, Kier, still grappling with confusion and grief, clung to her mother's coffin, unaware of the full extent of the tragedy. Phoebe, Nadine's sister, fought back tears as she brought her pair of shoes to the altar, the same ones Nadine had planned to wear to the prom. Tanith, another close friend, approached with delicate care, placing a photo album brimming with cherished memories on the polished wooden table. Each page held snapshots, capturing the essence of Nadine's vibrant spirit and radiant smile, images destined to eternally reside within the depths of their hearts. Priest Michael Moore, a beacon of sincere empathy, took his place at the altar, his countenance a reflection of the collective sorrow filling the chapel. With gentle yet firm words, he commenced the ceremony, his voice weaving a tapestry of eternal life and hopeful promises. To the grieving assembly, his words were like a soothing melody, offering solace to wounded hearts. In a moment of profound tenderness, Priest Michael turned his attention to little Kier, a beacon of innocence amidst the sea of mourning. With a paternal warmth, he expressed gratitude for the joy she had brought Nadine, and tenderly voiced hope for her future, promising an abundance of care and love. He pledged that they, the gathered mourners, would stand as Kier's guardian angels, a shield against life's harshness. Phoebe and Tanith, their voices choked with emotion, stepped forward to speak the final words, their love and grief intertwining in a poignant tribute to their beloved sister. Tears flowed freely as they bid their farewells, their hearts heavy with the weight of loss. As the strains of funeral music filled the air, marking the close of the ceremony, Nadine's coffin was gently lowered into the earth, finding its final resting place in the hallowed grounds of San Gabriel Cemetery. Loved ones gathered to bid their last goodbyes, their whispered prayers, a solemn tribute to a life lost too soon. In memory of Nadine's spirit and to provide support for Kier, who now faced a future without parental guidance, the Nadine Lot Charity Fund was established. A testament to the enduring legacy of love and compassion, it would serve as a beacon of hope for those in need, ensuring that Nadine's light would continue to shine brightly in the lives of others. Statistic serial killer Michael Madison. 2 weeks shy of Halloween 1977, Michael Madison was born on October 15th in Cleveland, Ohio. His parents, Diane Madison and John Baldwin, accidentally got pregnant and didn't have much of a relationship at the time of his birth. John Baldwin left Diane to care for their young son and denied being Michael's father. Growing up, Diane's mother had been a sex worker and heroin addict. She grew up in a household full of neglect. Diane's upbringing left her unprepared to care for her young son independently. Shortly after giving birth to her son, Michael, social workers were brought into the home. Diane was allowing her constant stream of boyfriends to punish Michael. When Michael was 2, Diane was found to have forcefully stuffed food down Michael's throat. As a result, the toddler began vomiting uncontrollably. Unsure of what to do, Diane put her screaming son into a tub full of hot water. This caused Michael to cry more. Growing frustrated with her young son, Diane took him out of a bath and beat him with an extension cord. I hear later, one of Diane's many boyfriends beat Michael so severely with a belt that the young boy vomited and needed to be hospitalized. In another horrific incident, Michael was beaten so severely by another one of Diane's boyfriends that he lost hearing in one of his ears. After years of abuse, Michael was sent to live with his grandmother, who was still a heroin addict and sex worker. But unfortunately, Michael's horrific childhood wouldn't change. Michael continued to be hospitalized for reasons such as dehydration. The social workers involved in Michael's case would note that he and his half-brother were covered in scratches and bruises. Before Michael reached high school, he had become a familiar face to law enforcement. On several occasions, the teenager had been found using women. In high school, he received a delinquent charge for inappropriately touching another classmate. The crimes Michael committed as a teenager were nothing like the ones he would go on to commit as an adult. In July 2013, the family of 38-year-old Angela Deskins reported her missing after they hadn't heard from her since June. Deskins was known for disappearing from time to time, so the family didn't think much of it. A month after she went missing, her body was discovered wrapped in electrical cords with a belt around her neck. 28-year-old Chenet Edwards was reported missing in September 2012 when she didn't show up at her mother's house. Sheely, along with her 12-year-old daughter, were living with extended family at the time, and Sheely was supposed to stop by her mother's house to borrow some money, but she never showed. Her body was found in July 2013 inside a plastic garbage bag. After returning home from her job at an elementary school, 18-year-old Cheryl Terry disappeared. Her body was also found inside a black trash bag. On July 19, 2013, Michael's neighbors called the police to report a horrible smell coming from a garage near his second-floor apartment building. Inside the garage, the police discovered the decomposing body of a woman. During the police search of the surrounding area, including other vacant homes and backyards, the police found the bodies of 2 more women. Each was wrapped in plastic bags and located approximately 200 yards apart. The police were granted a search warrant for Michael's home, and inside they found further evidence of decomposition. Now the search was on to find where Michael Madison was. The police tracked him down to his mother's house. When they arrived, Michael refused to come out, resulting in a several-hour-long standoff between him and the police before he finally agreed to come out and was taken into police custody. Michael never once showed remorse to the victims' families during the trial. Michael laughed, smiled, and taunted the families. During Cheryl Terry's father's victim impact statement, Michael smiled at the distraught father. This set Terry's father off, and he tried to attack Michael but was quickly stopped. Michael didn't stop smiling once during the altercation. The jury deliberated less than a day before Michael Madison was found guilty of all 3 murders. He was also found guilty of 3 counts of kidnapping, 3 counts of gross abuse of a corpse, 1 count of rape, and 1 count of weapons possession by an ex-convict. On May 20, 2016, Michael was sentenced to death, a sentence he would attempt to appeal a month later. On July 21, 2020, the Ohio Supreme Court voted unanimously to uphold the death sentence for Michael Madison. Killer Ronald O'Brien. Children are cautioned from an early age not to accept candy from strangers. While this golden rule is strictly enforced by vigilant parents throughout the year, on Halloween night, they throw caution to the wind and allow their little ones to go door to door asking for treats. In most instances, their request is granted without worry. Even so, once in a while, the monsters that lurk in the shadows take advantage of the occasion, resulting in dire consequences for the most innocent among us. In 1974, a boy in Pasadena, Texas fell victim to just such a predator when he became violently ill after indulging in a treat from his Halloween bag. After the concerned parent, his father had stayed by his side during the hour-long ordeal, offering comfort to the youngster as he convulsed on the bathroom floor. Only 8 years old at the time, Timothy O'Brien died later that night on his way to the hospital. In a shocking turn of events, an autopsy revealed that he had ingested enough potassium cyanide to kill 2 grown men. As difficult as it was to believe, all signs pointed to the fact that someone had deliberately laced candy with the colorless compound before randomly handing it out to unsuspecting children. Investigators were convinced that a cold-blooded killer was hiding somewhere in the suburbs of Houston, and they intended to find him. With no suspects in mind and little evidence to go on, detectives theorized that an unscrupulous person who was angry at the world in general had decided to take the life of a complete stranger, a child no less, as a way of getting back at society. To make a difficult situation even worse, there was no telling how many children had received the tainted sweets. Although authorities had put out an emergency news bulletin requesting that all Halloween candy be brought to the police station for inspection, they feared that there would be other victims before all was said and done. While they faced an uphill battle, to be sure, investigators did have a few things working in their favor. For one, it had been raining heavily on the evening of Trick or Treat, which had limited the number of houses that Timothy and his sister Elizabeth had visited. More importantly, a chemical analysis of the contents of the boys' treat bag had enabled them to pinpoint the carrier of the poison. Lab tests revealed that the killer's lethal weapon of choice had been the sweet and sour powder contained inside of a straw-shaped pixie sticks. After meeting with the residents of the houses where the O'Brien children were known to have gotten candy, detectives were confident that none of them had given up pixie sticks. However, during the course of their interviews, they learned that someone had been witnessed doling out that particular treat and that someone had been Timothy's father, Ronald O'Brien. When he was brought in for questioning, O'Brien claimed that a man he had never seen before had emerged from a darkened home and given him several pixie sticks to hand out on his behalf. He added that, after consuming a small amount of the sugary powder, Timothy had complained that it tasted funny. Instead of telling him to throw it out, he had given his son the soft drink to help wash it down. Under the pretense of helping police solve the case, he had readily provided them with the address of the house where the exchange had taken place. Upon speaking with the mystery man, who turned out to be an air traffic controller named Claudine Melvin, officers learned that he had an alibi for the night in question. According to him, he had been at work and had not returned home until well after midnight. When they visited his place of employment, his supervisor confirmed his story and had the paperwork to prove it. In a stunning show of support, 200 of Melvin's coworkers came forward to vouch for his character. Realizing that they had been duped, investigators quickly concluded that this man was not their killer, something that Ronald O'Brien had known all along. A bit of digging into his past uncovered that Ronald O'Brien, who had trained as an optician, was not nearly as respectable as he wanted others to believe. I'm not content who couldn't hold a job, he was drowning in a sea of debt. Not above taking what he wanted, he had been accused of stealing on numerous occasions, usually by former employers. While being shiftless and prone to theft doesn't necessarily mean that someone is capable of murder, the fact that O'Brien had taken out hefty life insurance policies, not one but 3, on his children in the months prior to his son's untimely death moved him to the top of the list of suspects. Another nail in O'Brien's self-constructed coffin came when it was discovered that he had phoned the insurance company on the morning after his son's death, inquiring about a payout. As the 8-year-old's body lay in the icy morgue, his father's only concern had been how quickly the money he had coming would change hands. On November 5, 1974, less than a week after Timothy was poisoned, Ronald O'Brien was taken into custody and formally charged with 1 count of murder and 4 counts of attempted murder. To no one's surprise, he pleaded not guilty across the board. He would steadfastly maintain his innocence throughout the trial, despite the damning evidence against him. During the proceedings, a parade of witnesses testified that O'Brien had become fixated on the properties of cyanide in the months leading up to his son's murder. His obsession led him to brazenly ask friends and family alike if they knew where he could purchase the deadly poison. He would also inquire of them if they had any idea how much of the substance it would take to kill a person. In June of 1975, 8 months after little Timothy O'Brien had been laid to rest, his father was convicted of his murder. He was also found guilty in the attempted poisonings of the other 4 children, none of whom had ingested the lethal powder. For his crimes, Ronald O'Brien, whom the press had dubbed the Candyman, was condemned to the electric chair. Down the road, as alternative methods of execution were introduced, his punishment was amended to a more humane death by lethal injection. It had taken the jury just over an hour to decide the fate of the man who had so callously plotted and carried out the murder of someone who had trusted him implicitly. Once the verdict was in, the waiting game began. As it happened, 9 years would pass, more time than Timothy had spent on this earth before his killer would face final justice. During his time on death row, O'Brien was reviled by his fellow inmates who, despite their own misdeeds, considered him to be lower than a snake's belly. Their hatred of the child killer ran so deep that they had thrown a party on the day of his demise to let him know that he would not be missed. After several stays of execution, O'Brien was put to death on March 31, 1984, at the age of 39. When asked if he had any last words, he had taken the opportunity to rail against the system that had allowed him to come to such an end. When his death was announced over the loudspeaker, hundreds of people who had gathered outside the prison to celebrate the occasion had shouted trick or treat while throwing handfuls of candy in the air in remembrance of Timothy, a young boy who had paid the ultimate price for his father's greed. Todd Allen Reed, the Forest Park killer. The bodies of 3 women were found in the same stretch of parkland, all within a month of each other. It was not long before police had their man. But is he responsible for more than the 3 murders they convicted him for? 32-year-old Todd Allen Reed was already a registered sex offender when he strangled to death at least 3 women before dunking their naked bodies in Forest Park, a heavily wooded area just west of Portland, Oregon. From 1992 to 1995, he had served a measly 2.5 years of a 12-year sentence for the sexual assault of Shelley Harding, who was 7 months pregnant at the time of his cowardly attack. She had been walking home from work when he approached her and forced her into his car at knife point. Reed was involved in and fled the scene of a minor crash with another vehicle on his way to the secluded spot where he sexually assaulted Shelley. After he had assaulted her, he attempted to strangle her with a seatbelt and began to cry. Shelley was strong and she was calm. She had been talking to Reed constantly, like he was a friend almost, building a rapport. Whilst doing so, she made sure to leave as much physical evidence as she could, touching every surface to leave as many of her prints as possible. Whatever this monster was going to do to her, she wasn't going to make it easy for him to get away with. When Reed broke down, she used this to her advantage, and her pleas to be let go and her promises that she would not tell anyone worked. Reed let her go. Not only did Shelley report her abduction and assault, the 2 men that had been in the car that Reed had crashed into also reported the hit and run. They even had his license plate. Reed pleaded no contest and was handed the 12-year sentence. He was registered as a sex offender and, crucially, his DNA was taken and stored in the state crime lab. This would be the golden ticket police needed to catch the Forest Park serial killer 7 years later. Reed was released early as he had built up sentence-reducing credits, half of which were for good behavior. At roughly 8 miles long and 5,100 acres, Forest Park is one of the largest urban forest reserves in the USA, ranked 19th to be more precise. It is not easy to wander from the 70 miles of trails due to the park's dense vegetation. To highlight just how secluded this park can get, once you're off trail, in 2004, a 53-year-old man called Frank and his 12-year-old daughter Ruth were discovered to be living off-grid in the park. They had been there for 4 years, completely undetected. On May 7, 1999, a couple walking their dog on one of the park's more remote trails would come across the body of 28-year-old Willa Faye Mahler. She was naked and face down, entangled in thick blackberry brambles. She had been strangled, and it was determined that her body had been there for around 2 months. Police would find a used condom merely 28 feet from her body. They were able to extract DNA from this vital piece of evidence. The next day, May 8th, police themselves would discover a second body whilst they were searching the immediate area. The body of 26-year-old Stephanie Lynn Muscle was found around a quarter of a mile away from where Lilla had been discovered. She too was found naked and had been strangled. Tests would determine she had been left there less than a week before she was found. They would also recover traces of DNA on her thighs. A group of hikers would find the third body, that of 18-year-old Alexandria Eisen, in the early evening of June 2nd. Alexandria had been reported missing sometime in May. Police were unable to reach her body until the next day. Due to the location, she'd been dumped down an extremely steep slope, just off of a deer path. She was found naked, and she too had been strangled. Her body was around 1/4 of a mile away from Lueck and Stephanie's. After the discovery of Alexandria's body, Police Chief Charles Moves admitted that investigators had concluded they were looking for a serial killer due to the similarities of the crimes. Physically, all 3 women resembled each other, but they also had very similar life experiences. They were all homeless at the time of their deaths and had cocaine and heroin addictions, although Stephanie had just completed a detox program before her murder. Lilla and Alexandria had been at some point engaged in prostitution to pay for these addictions. All three women were known to frequent West Burnside Street. It's also been claimed that Lila and Stephanie knew each other, although this has not been proven either way. It was determined that all three of the women had been murdered elsewhere and their bodies were taken to Forest Park afterwards. Toxicology all showed that they had taken heroin sometime before their deaths. The police response was immediate and it was impressive. A specialist task force consisting of 16 individuals was formed and they set about scouting bars, reaching out and offering protection to the community being targeted, and 30 additional beds were made available for homeless women during the investigation. Although residents were not happy about the lack of information they were receiving, the police kept their investigation tightly under wraps, such was their determination to catch this killer. The task force would use the physical similarities of the three women to their advantage. A female officer of a similar appearance posed as a prostitute on West Burnside Street to see if they could reel the killer in. And sure enough, Reed took the bait. On the July 7th, the same day a vigil was being held for Lila, Stephanie, and Alexandria, Reed approached the undercover officer, and it was not long before his suspicious behavior flagged him to police. At about 5:20 a.m., he was approached by a member of the lookout team, Sergeant John Botchelet. Reed readily admitted that he was a sex offender and agreed to a search of his vehicle. They found an unused condom, a book entitled A Killing Gift about a woman who can kill men by merely looking at them, and some yellow strapping. There was nothing incriminating to be found, and the police had to let him go. He was not off the hook, however, far from it. Another lookout that night, Detective Sergeant Dave Schlegel, recognized him from the 1992 sexual assault case. He had in fact been the arresting officer. Police began 24-hour surveillance of Reed, both at his home and at his place of work. At least once during this surveillance, he was observed driving in circles around West Burnside and Sandy Boulevard. The police swab results came back and confirmed that the DNA from the condom at the Mower crime scene and the DNA found on Stephanie's thighs matched the DNA that was on file for Todd Allen Reed. At around 7:30 p.m. on July 18th, after Reed had left for work, police executed a search warrant at his address, where he lived with his girlfriend. Once the police had left the premises, his girlfriend phoned him to let him know the police had been there. He attempted to make a getaway in the middle of his shift, but it was too late. The police had already arrived. At 11:30 p.m. on July 18th, 11 days after police had questioned him and only 1.5 months after the task force was set up, Reed was arrested outside of Ranella Produce, the warehouse where he worked night shifts, unloading the delivery trucks. On July 27th, he was indicted on 7 criminal counts in relation to 3 homicides. It emerged that Reed, who had been ordered to serve 8 years post-prison supervision, had actually been kicked out of a sex offender treatment program 2 weeks before his arrest for failure to attend. On February 23, 2001, he pleaded guilty and received 3 consecutive life sentences with no possibility of parole. Reed had been facing the death penalty, but his plea deal took this off of the table. Reed is also the prime suspect in 2, possibly 3, other murders in the Portland area. The cases being referred to by Reed are the 1987 cold case murders of 15-year-old Jennifer Lyncher and 12-year-old Mendy Colleen Thomas, and the 1999 disappearance of 19-year-old Amma Vecines. In regards to the murders, Gresham Police Sergeant David Lerwick has been quoted as saying, "Always suspect that he was the person who killed both those girls. We didn't have enough evidence to convict him." Jennifer had gone missing on July 3rd, 1987, and her skeletal remains was found on July 8th, 1988. Mingy went missing from the apartment complex where she lived on August 3rd, 1987, and her body was discovered on October 4th, 1988. Both of the children had been strangled and dumped in wooded areas on the eastern side of Gresham, about 3 miles apart, and they were both last seen in the company of Gail Bennett, Reed's then girlfriend and later wife. They married in 1988 and divorced in 1997. Gresham police said Bennett, who has a police record of her own, might have information about the killings but has been uncooperative. Bennett has denied any knowledge. At the time, police were operating under the assumption that they had both been killed by the same man and that this man was known to them. They had questioned Reed at the time of the investigation due to the fact they had both been seen with Gail, but he was never charged or arrested. Police renewed efforts to solve the Gresham cases after his arrest in the Portland killings, but attempts to compare DNA from the old crimes with Reed's DNA have been inconclusive. The witnessing on June 30th, 1999 and has not been seen since. She was working as a prostitute at the time of her disappearance, and it has been claimed she knew / was friends with Alexandria Eisen. No charges have been brought forward in her case, although it is impossible to downplay the likelihood they already had something to do with Ametha's disappearance. As of June 2020, what prison Reed is in is not known, and as of June 2021, he was no longer listed as an inmate and may be dead.